the Wednesday, May 15th meeting. Can we have roll call?
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that one more time. Welcome to the Wednesday, May 15 Planning Commission meeting. Can we have roll call, please?
Planning Commissioners Astorian.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Landrigan.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Lee. Planning Commissioner Sheets.
Here.
And Chairperson Yesayan.
Here. Great. Can we have report regarding posting of the agenda?
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, May 8th, 2013, on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Thank you. If everyone can please stand. Repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion or any comments?
I move approval.
Second.
Great. Can we have roll call?
Planning Commissioners Astorian.
Yes.
Landrigan.
Yes.
Sheets.
Aye.
Chairperson Yesayan.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is for last week.
Yes.
Last time. So I had
Abstain.
I spoke only too soon. I have to abstain. I was not here.
Is that fine? Okay. Oral communication. Looks like I don't have any cards for oral communications. So we'll skip that. And then we will go to our first case, zoning appeals, old business. This is parking reduction permit case number PPRP 1227790. You have a staff report?
Actually, Commissioners, I'll be brief because this case was continued from the last hearing, which originally was heard back in March, and then continued for more information. And the more information that the Commission wanted to see was an actual parking study and inventory of the conditions in terms of parking and how many spaces are occupied during operating hours of all the different tenants there in the shopping center. And based on the parking demand study that was submitted by the applicant, we actually have one that was submitted on dated April 11th. And the appellant's new representative, Shogi Yepremian, submitted a parking analysis of the shopping center, which documented the new hours of operation. If you recall back during the March hearing, originally during the planning hearing officer hearing, the time frame or the operating hours was Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mm-hmm. At the last Planning Commission hearing, where you actually heard some testimony, was where the applicant stated, at that time the applicant's representative stated the hours of operation had changed, or they were, yes, they did say they'd change it, to be Friday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the children's indoor playground. So now with the new representative on board, Ms. Yepremian stated that in her document that the new operating hours have changed again, but it was going to be similar to the original when the planning hearing officer heard the case. Monday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So that's what we're dealing with today.
Monday through Sunday.
Monday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And going back to Ms. Yepremian's analysis or documentation as it relates to the parking demand study and the inventory, the document was submitted to you, dated April 11th, and she did show that in that parking analysis, it included information in terms of the existing uses in the center, the hours of operation for each use, and then code-required parking, and they demonstrated that in exhibits. It's in your packet, B and C. In addition, the parking analysis was further supplemented with some limited parking count conducted on 3 separate days for a 15 to 30-minute time period. However, additional information came in May 6th, which, again, corroborated the fact that there is sufficient parking on site where they've counted on 3 separate days, morning, late afternoon hours, meaning after school hours. And it showed, for example, that there were anywhere from 15 to 28 spaces available. For example, on Wednesday, April 17th, 20 cars were parked on site at 3 p.m.
What part of Exhibit B are you in now?
Oh, no, I'm not on Exhibit B. I'm on the May 6th document that came in, the latest, more recent document.
Very end of the packet, after those pictures.
Yeah, because I want to say, this is the first time I'm looking at these exhibits, right? Well, I mean, I don't know about any one of my colleagues here. I've not seen this in our packets.
Okay.
Am I correct? Were this in our packets?
We're what?
Did you get these in
Yeah.
your packets? Okay.
So on May 6th,
But mine wasn't in color.
it was noted that, on Wednesday, April 17th, it was noted at 3 p.m. there were 20 spaces occupied. On Thursday, May 2nd, 10:30 a.m., 16 spaces were occupied. And Monday, May 6th, more recently, at 4 p.m., 18 spaces were occupied. And I personally went out myself just to verify in terms of the existing parking condition, and noted that on May 8th, approximately around 3:30 p.m., there were 26 spaces occupied. And again, we're dealing with a center that has approximately, I believe, 69 parking spaces, what they've noted. And I went out on Monday this week, and I noted that there were 18 spaces occupied. So, staff's opinion, there appears to be parking available for the use that's being proposed.
So is that a reversal in your recommendation?
It's up to us, I think.
It's up to the Planning Commission.
Okay, great. So I do have one card.
Could I ask one question?
Yeah.
As parking was only one element of your recommendation for not meeting all the findings, are the rest of the findings, was that the only finding that we,
Yeah, the
It's
main issue
making-
that the planning hearing officer had was that we didn't have enough evidence to support the applicant's assertion that there was sufficient parking on site to accommodate the new, in this case, the new use being a in children's indoor playground. So this was the information that we were lacking.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments, questions? Okay. I do have one speaker. It's Shori Yepramian.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, staff.
And how,
So
I'm sorry, one second. How much time does she have? 15 minutes. Okay, great.
Very good.
And you're representing the consultant?
Correct.
You're the consultant?
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, staff, good afternoon. Shoikia Premian, representing the business owner and the operator, Mr. Sarkis and Lilith Dishian, who are not here today. They had a family emergency, so I'm here representing them. For the record, I did not file the original parking reduction permit application. I did not attend any of the previous hearing that the zoning hearing officer had or the Planning Commission back in March 6th. Thank you, Milka, for the brief presentation. But I did go back and review the case file. That's in the Planning Division. I did go back, listen to all the hearings, and know what the Commission and staff required for this particular case. This is a very unique shopping center located at the southwest corner of Chevy Chase Drive and Central Avenue. The lot size is a little bit over an acre, 54,841 square feet, which is developed by 21,735 square foot commercial development and 2 residential units facing Chevy Chase Drive. The development on site occurred at various stages between 1960 and 1963 when code requirements at the time were at their minimum. Based on my understanding of the case, the Planning Commission as well as staff needed additional information, documentation as to how the shopping center was being operated, what the tenants were, the code requirements for each tenant space, for each land use, as well as hours of operation. So I did provide that in my documents to staff and to you. The Planning Commission also had a question, or staff actually had a question about the alcohol beverage application for the billiard hall, which I will address later on. In looking at this application, what I first did is summarize, which is your Exhibit A, different uses within the shopping center by address, by use, business name, square footage, days of the week, and hours of operation, including the proposed indoor children's playground. The second page kind of summarized different various land uses and the parking requirements, which total to 79 parking spaces required for all of the uses that are currently there, and 4 for the residential parking spaces. Now, 2 things I didn't do. I didn't really go back to 1960s and analyze if there are any non-conforming situation within the shopping center, and I didn't really feel the need that I needed to go back and look at to see if there are any parking exceptions, parking variances issued for other tenants within the shopping center. I didn't even get to do that because I felt very comfortable as to what my analysis showed. To me, the total parking required for the entire shopping center is 79. Currently, there are 69 parking spaces. So deficiency, the number that we're dealing with is 10 parking spaces short. Staff indicated in their report 11, but I disagree with that number because they only looked at change of use for that specific tenant and not looked at the overall parking requirements for the entire shopping center. Visiting the site, I also realized that the site is unique because it's a large corner property. I counted at least 10 on-street parking, which is not part of the required code calculation, but also it's available on street, at least 10 on Central Avenue, just fronting this property, not looking at South Central, North Central, and also on Chevy Chase. Most of the Chevy Chase fronting this property is red curb. Only 1 space is available. So to me, there's 11 on-street parking spaces available, but not calculated within this study. Exhibit B, basically I looked at weekday hours for all different businesses that are currently there. And I totaled the required number of parking spaces on top of each bar. And in summary, weekday hours, the highest parking requirement is between 10 and 5 o'clock, which is 57 parking spaces. That's the highest required number of parking spaces if we look at all of the tenant spaces with the land uses and hours of operation. So that's the highest number it should get per code requirements. I did the same with the weekend hours. Weekend hours, some of the businesses are closed, as you see in that chart. The highest number, again, per code requirement is between 6 and 8, which is the late afternoon hours, and that's for the billiard hall and the retail space, which is 41. So the highest number is 41. That would be required per zoning code requirement, again, based on the land uses, the current code requirements, and the hours of operation. And Sunday, the highest number would be 22. So that kind of summarized weekday hours and weekend hours. Based on that, I had to revise the findings because I was not the applicant or the representative when this application was first filed. Based on my findings, I had to go back and look at the findings and wrote the explanations in detail. Now, with parking reduction permit, there are 4 categories that one can apply to. One is mixed use, which I thought this would be applicable because it has commercial and residential component, and within commercial there are different land uses. So I identified my arguments in that section of the application, going back to 1960s and showing that back in 1963 when this development was built, it was built with more parking spaces than what was required at the time. So to start with, they developed with more parking spaces than it was required. Category B didn't apply because of this particular site. And Category C, which is uses adjacent to local or regional transit lines. I indicate that Central Avenue is classified as a major arterial according to the city's circulation element of the general plan. Chevy Chase is classified as a minor arterial. The proposed indoor children's playground will be located in the shopping center. Metro provides bus service, which is 180 and 181 line, east-west direction from Pasadena to Hollywood, and serves many of these commercial and residential uses. The bus stop, which I also photographed, is right at the corner of Chevy Chase and Central. The B-Line service also serves the city's residents. Route number 2, which provides transportation northbound on Brand and southbound on Central Avenue. And finally, Category C, which says for projects other than those described above, I also provided explanation because some of the questions were related to this particular project. And under additional statements, I basically included the business hours of operation, which is Monday through Sunday, 10 to 6. Monday through Friday, they are proposing to do an open play time for up to 15 kids. And Saturdays and Sundays is when kids' birthday parties will take place 3 times a day for 2-hour duration for up to 15 kids again. And I included children's age group and number of staff. I visited the site 7 times between March 29th and May 6th. So I kind of picked certain days of the week, including Saturday, and different hours of the day. The lowest parking count I had was 16, which was on a Thursday at 10:30 a.m., and the highest was a Saturday, 33 parking spaces. So those were my findings. I attached all of the photographs. Every time I visited the site, I took photos towards the north side, south side, east and west of the parking lot. I also included a Google map, which I know we can't really rely on, but I think in this case, I'm including it because we don't know what the day of the week or what time this is taken, but it's a daytime hour, and it's 2013, so it's fairly recent, sometime this year, where it shows how many parking spaces the site has as available parking spaces. So even though we don't know when, but this is the accurate condition of the site. This concludes my report. I would like to express the fact that my findings are very clear. The data is very clear. I visited the site 7 times. It is my opinion that there is sufficient number of parking spaces. The site was built back in 1960s when the parking requirements were so low, but they provided at least 26 more parking spaces at the time. My client has been waiting since last July to occupy the space. They're waiting for the city to make a decision so that he can operate it. And I would like to get a favorable decision from you, support initial recommendation of staff, and reverse the zoning hearing officer's decision. If the commission is inclined to approve, I would like to amend 2 conditions from the original staff's conditions. I can do that now or later on. It's up to you.
Can you
To
state
just
what they are?
reflect. Staff's initial report included 15 conditions. And I think number 11, which deals with which deals with the applicant shall provide a 30-minute break. According to my client, he needs an hour break between events, so you can keep this as a 30-minute break or 1 hour, but what he told me that he will need a 30-minute break to clean up from one event and get ready for another event. And
Do
number
we
13.
state as 1 hour right now? Is that
Well,
what
that's what he told me, so that's what I'm representing.
Okay.
So, but staff initially had half-hour break
Okay.
time.
You're requesting an hour.
He needs at least an
At
hour
least an hour.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
And number 13, which includes the hours of operation, to just reflect his current proposal, which is 10 to 6. So those are the two amendments that I propose. And if you have any questions, I can.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yes, Miss Landrigan?
Ms. Yepremian, thank you, very nicely done. You did mention you were going to talk about the billiards in the CB. and
Yes,
you forgot.
thank
Would
you,
you bring
thank
that
you.
up? Thank you.
At the last meeting, staff brought up the issue of ABC application form that was submitted. The fact that the billiard hall and this proposed indoor playground is owned by one business operator. Apparently, the previous applicant did not file the right form, so I referred them to the right person so that that individual can work with ABC and obtain the right form and fill out the right application. They will be, I'm sure ABC will have some requirements because there's currently one access, if you look at the floor plan, one access from the parking lot to a hallway, and then the uses get separated. The fact that the hours of operations are different, billiard hall starts at 6 o'clock, so children's playground will have to lock the door when the billiard hall is in operation and vice versa. So when the children's playground is in operation, the billiard hall will be locked as well. But I'm sure there will be other requirements they have to deal with. And as I remember, Jillian at the last meeting said that will have no impact to this particular application, but that's something they have to deal with ABC office.
Can I ask you a question on that? Since this will be children and they're going to be supervised, however, when they go out in the hall and they share a restroom that is not an exclusive restroom and it is adjacent to a billiard hall, is that not a concern?
If they were operating at the same time, I would be concerned. But the fact that that one particular back door will be locked until 6 o'clock. So when the children are in the playground during the day, they will open the back door, use the restrooms, and go back in. So that door will be closed and locked while the children's playground is in operation.
Well, my question is, they're two separate businesses, and if you have employees coming in early to set up, regardless of when they're opening, they will have to go in and out and use those facilities. That's
Yeah.
not part of this, but just in concern for children and that situation, that's the 6 o'clock end time that has me concerned.
Right. Hopefully, because it's one ownership in terms of operation, they can control that. But again, I'm not aware of ABC's other requirements. So I think they may get the ABC license, they may not get the ABC license, given their type of operation at the billiard place. So that, again, it's going to depend on their business.
Yeah, I agree with Shogi that in terms of the business itself and the site plan that you're seeing, there are going to have to be minor modifications to it because it is independent. It depends on the application that the applicant applies for. The one that was applied for before requires a physical separation in the structure. They cannot share any of the same facilities. So they would have to separate the openings, they would have to separate the restrooms, they would have to be completely separate. They can be next to each other, but they can't be the same, they can't share facilities. However, if they change their permit and come in with a different alcohol permit, it's possible that this might be fine It just depends on the permit. So we could only go off the ones that we had seen before, and based on that permit, this site plan would have to be altered to allow their indoor play facility to occur at that location. But as we're hearing, the applicant may change their permit. If they do change their permit, then this may function just as it's shown.
Well, yes, I think Commissioner Landerger's concern is, what if they don't, and what if this is the use? So she's raising a concern that is, pretty reasonable. And I'll be very honest with you. I mean, conditions could be adding another padlock to the door. And that's not acceptable, not to me at least, at this moment. When you have children and then you have a billiard hall, it's kind of a force against each other, in my opinion. Now, having said that, let me ask you a question, Ms. Stutler. If the billiard hall is serving alcohol, aren't they required to have two male and female restrooms?
That's correct.
Do they have it now?
The way it's shown right now, for just the billiard hall, they do, but there's not a separate restroom in addition for the daycare. Or
Right, but they do have two
indoor
restrooms.
player. Yes, they do.
Male and male.
Yes, they do.
Regardless of how this thing turns out, Monsieur Premier, I personally think it should be a condition, and Ms. Van Meiden can speak for herself. Although she said that that issue of separation has no impact, but she left it at our discretion to make it so. So that's where it's at. And if I'm wrong, you can correct me.
Members of the Planning Commission, Planning Commission Chair, the issue is really what is the permit that's before you right now for consideration. And since the ABC license application is not before you for the CUP, you are really left with the facts that are related to this particular application for your consideration. And I think Ms. Stotler raised an important point. At that point where that application comes in, there will be requirements related to its issuance, and that will, by necessity, involve an identification of surrounding uses and use types. And so it may or may not be issuable based on the ability of the applicant at that time to meet particular conditions. So my comment was on that basis, that it's simply not in front of you, so it's more speculative at this point to try to craft conditions in anticipation of something that isn't before you for consideration.
So we would deal with the existing configuration and the existing adjacencies as it is today,
That's correct, yes.
which still concern me.
And what are the
Is it-
hours of the billiard operation?
6 to 12 every day. But again, we don't know what type of ABC license they will be applying for, and if they will be getting an approval
6 to
from
12.
ABC.
6 to 12 every day?
Every day, I believe so.
So they don't actually, the hours of operation ever overlap?
No,
Billiard.
no. That was my point, that the indoor children playground is from 10 to 6, and then billiard hall will be 6 to 12.
Okay. And this other application, it will come before us as well?
No, the alcohol permit for the billiard, that is a separate permit that's been handled through a planning hearing officer. So that is a separate permit completely. It will not come before the planning commission. The reason you're seeing the parking reduction permit is it was denied and appealed. So you're hearing it because this is an appeal. And this is limited to the parking reduction permit. And the only reason we raise the whole issue of the alcohol permit is because the way it is shown on the site plan, there's going to need to be an alteration of the site plan if the alcohol permit is actually, if that billiard hall proceeds with it. It's more of a heads up that there may be an alteration to the plan that you're seeing. But in terms of the parking reduction permit, there's no change in that. It is, whether or not the alcohol permit is approved or not, the amount of parking reduction that's requested would be the same.
Based on
So they can't serve alcohol right now? Or they don't
At
have
this
this
point, they
permit
have
right now?
permission to do it from the city. They need to receive permission from ABC. And
Before
so
they can actually
before they can
serve.
actually sell. And my understanding is that the way it's designed right now and shown, it For the permit they applied for with ABC, it does not meet the requirements. The billiard hall does not meet the requirements for the ABC. So there would have to be a separation in the facilities. Right now, you can see there's joint facilities. The restrooms are shared and the access to the rear portion of the site is shared. So that would need to be physically separated. But that doesn't mean they can't apply for a different alcohol permit. And so in terms of the application that you're seeing, there may be a slight alteration in the site plan, and that's why we brought it up, just so you're aware that there may be a change in the site plan, but the number of parking that they're requesting for reduction, that wouldn't change. In terms of the parking for the billiard hall, that has a restriction for the hours of operation. It cannot open before 6 o'clock, just as Ms. Dupremian is stating.
Any other?
One
Yeah.
question
Sheets.
relative to the current usage in both usages. Where does the business stand relative to applying for the ABC permit today?
I just referred them to a consultant who handles ABC licenses. I know they had discussions, but I don't know if they actually pursued it.
Okay.
But they need to research and file according to what their business is like and get an approval from ABC.
So would it be your assumption then that they are not currently, at this point in time,
Have filed anything.
have filed? They have not filed.
no.
So when they do file, the usage for the playground will be, whatever it is, it will be final, and that's what will be included in the ABC permit. Does that sound?
Well, again, that's a separate.
I'm not trying to bring them together.
Right.
What I'm saying is, we're doing one, I understand that, and we'll deal with it. When the ABC permit, if they were doing it today and it's going before a hearing tomorrow,
Their
I wouldn't
issue.
think that would be adequate, that would be appropriate. But
They
now,
because it's a fairly large space, billiard hall, it's 5,500. They may be able to accommodate the rest. If it's just a restroom issue,
Sure, yeah.
they may be able to accommodate it within that space.
I
but
think
we
that would
don't
take
know.
its course. And my only concern was if they're in process at the moment,
Yeah, they're not.
how would the two match up, and would the usages be accurate in the application? If that's not the case, I really don't have a question. So,
Look, the Commissioner Sheets, I was the one that said we need to concentrate on the permitting, the parking permit. I mean, I brought
I
the issue
understand
up
that.
last time.
I understand
I
that.
tell you, I've thought about this thing, and I have a problem with it. What we're doing is that we're referring a problem that exists now, with or without the ABC license. With or without the ABC license. The fact is that the use is a billiard hall, which is an adult-centric use. I think we'll all agree on that. Versus a children's play room. Forget about the brewskis for a moment. I mean, let's put that aside. But that's a use that is next to a children's play room. And we have a facility, a restroom that is being shared by both. I have a question for the city attorney. Can we, as part of the discretionary permit for the parking reduction, require that this space, forget about the billiard hall, this space have its own restroom? Or is it stretching?
Members of the Planning Commission, Commissioner Astorian, it is stretching it a bit. These are both permitted uses within the zone. And with respect to restroom facilities, that's really more of a building code issue, and somewhat of a zoning issue, of course, but more of a building code issue. So it is stretching it. They are both permitted uses within this zone. So they could be adjacent to one another within a facility such as this, and be permitted by the zone.
But this is shared. This is not just only adjacent. They don't just share a wall. They share a door.
They share
That's
a
okay.
bathroom.
From a zoning perspective, yes, it is. And again, the matter before you is the parking reduction permit. So really, the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission right now is to whether or not the findings can be met for purposes
Just the
of
parking reduction.
issuing
Okay.
the permit, although, there can be some discussion relative to the use as it would impact demand on parking.
And I have no problems with the parking reduction. The way that it was presented makes a lot of sense, and I congratulate you for putting together a case that makes sense, at least to me. But I do have an issue with this restroom shared, this funky thing, and whether or not our zoning ordinances allow it or so forth. It's for my comfort level. It's a stretch for my comfort level. Let me put it to you that way.
There are a lot of businesses, especially I've seen restaurants, for example, on Montrose, which have shared restrooms, for
But they're
example.
all adults. I mean, these are not kids. You have 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, by your own admission,
Yeah.
that are going to be next to a billiard hall. What if somebody forgets the lock? What if somebody forgets to close the door? And, well, whatever.
And what
I
if
don't wanna
it's
get
your
too graphic.
children?
Well, the hours also don't all overlap with each other. So the concerns that we're having, I would be more concerned if the hours did overlap.
Correct.
But the last party that finishes up, which I'm sure it's before 6 p.m., so they have enough time to clean up, is going to be before the billiard place actually opens up.
Do we want to?
That
Um,
and
Public hearing?
yeah. Well,
Unless we have more questions.
do we have any more questions for Ms. Diapremia? No, I don't have any more cards for this hearing.
Then if I might, you could close the public hearing and then commence deliberations prior to.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
attention.
Do we have any more questions and comments for staff? Okay.
Maybe we should suggest a kiddie billiard school next door, too.
I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Okay, do we have any comments? Yeah.
I think we do.
I think the presentation and justification for a parking reduction are very well presented and substantiated. As you know, my concern is with the shared restroom facility. I know that the people who are going to be working with these children are probably going to have to be fingerprinted, and they will have to be vetted, but the people who are next door that are going to use the restroom aren't. And to me, that just seems like a disaster waiting to happen. And I know we don't have any control over it, but we do have control over the hours. And to me, 6 o'clock when it ends and 6 o'clock when it starts is too darn close. The original hours where it went to 5, I might consider, but allowing it to go right up to when you might be having individuals waiting outside, coming in, employees, creates, to me, just too much of a flashpoint. So, and if it were my children, and I don't have any, if it was my sister's children, if it was your children, I would have the same concern. So that is my biggest concern, is that, there are two really disparate uses together.
I'm sorry to interrupt the deliberations, but I would just note for the commission's, for the record, that should the commission desire to modify the hours in some way, there needs to be a nexus with the parking reduction permit itself, so the demand that's created by one or the other uses would necessitate a modification of those hours in some way. So just to keep that in mind during your deliberations.
Well,
And
what is the existing condition?
It's already 5 to 10 to 5,
Let
right?
the planners provide the specifics.
Texas isn't left yet before the other.
Go ahead, Ms.
It was just a recommendation that was made in the staff report to the planning hearing officer. I mean, there was nothing actually, no decision, that's not a decision that was made by the planning hearing officer.
I thought it was number 13.
The case planner prepared a staff report to the planning hearing officer for the planning hearing officer hearing. At the time, the case planner made a recommendation to approve the project and made some suggested conditions if the planning hearing officer was inclined to approve it. clearly the planning hearing officer denied the case, so therefore there were no conditions that were made. And again, going back to number 13, that was just a recommendation if the hearing officer was inclined to approve it.
Okay. And what is this nexus that we have to make? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Certainly. There needs to be a relationship, a reasonable relationship between the condition imposed and the permit itself and what that permit is about. So here, a condition limiting hours would be to prevent there from being over parking due to reciprocal uses within the parking within the center, for example.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be limiting hours on the basis of the uses just in and of themselves, but because those uses create a particular parking demand and you're trying to reduce that demand in some way by modifying the hours. So that would be an example
But it
of
is
how the
within,
nexus is
it is
drawn.
within our jurisdiction to add a condition.
Absolutely,
If
yes.
you can tie them together.
And yes,
So let me
be
ask,
tied together to minimize the impacts that are potentially generated by granting the permit, and in order to allow the granting of the permit to conform better with the findings that are being
sure.
made.
So as an example, the hour, I agree with the fact that the hours are too close. I mean, I know everybody in this room wants to do things right. I know the owner wants to do it right, but people don't leave that early. Businesses and activities don't stop at that moment. So the nexus for me would be if you stop at 6 and start at 6, the nexus would be everybody isn't gone yet. Now, I could have you go back and prove that to me or prove against it, but my take would be, because I agree with this issue, that there's a problem with the dual usage. A solution for me or a mitigation for me would be change the hours so that people that are using it one way have a chance to complete their activity, get in their car and leave. Now the study done by Yohig says this is what is actual, and I can deal with that. I can work with that because I truly believe that they've done a great effort. We're in the right place now, much better than we were in the first hearing. So is that a nexus? I guess I'm stating it, but I'm asking, would that be that relationship that we're looking for?
That there's a buffer between the two activities and the parking ingress and egress, or clients.
Well, you're looking for facts.
Yeah.
And some of the facts that are stated here, and the planners can verify whether or not this is indeed the case, would be that there is a increased parking demand the closer you get to that time of transition. And so in order to avoid that or minimize that, especially where that demand might exceed available supply, it's appropriate, based on facts, to craft a condition that would help to avoid that situation from occurring. So yes, that appears to be reasonable, but you can verify it further.
All right. Mr. Foy, did you have something to say? No?
I mean, you are kind of assuming then that the billiards hall is going to be at full operation and have a full crowd at 6 p.m. when it opens.
We're not assuming anything.
I'm not assuming anything. Trying to make a nexus.
Okay, well, and I think it's within our rights to make a nexus to the best we think we determine is feasible and accurate. Any other comments?
No?
Okay.
Was that deliberation or was that end of the hearing?
Well, let me close the hearing and then we'll finalize this. Do we have any deliberation or comments before we're ready to vote on this?
What I just said, that I'm glad that, I'm sorry that we had to make the owner go back and do the study, but I think it was needed. Things weren't as clear as they've been made now, and I think today's input was very productive and very helpful. But in my mind now, and on the previous hearing, was this issue around the common door. I still think it's still a concern, but I also realize it's not within our purview here. And I have to trust the other process to take care of any of those issues, but I also believe that we have an opportunity here to suggest the hours be changed enough to make a time frame when the two activities can comfortably start and stop and progress and be productive. So that's kind of where my thinking is now. I have a better understanding of what's going to happen there and what the parking is, and I feel comfortable as we go forward to make a final decision.
So, Commissioner Sheets, is it, without minimizing the gravity of this thing, the bathroom door, by the way?
Yes.
So what you're suggesting is that if they are, and I don't know if you are suggesting this or not, if their operation time is between 10 and 6 and the billiard starts at 6, let's do the operation time for this use between, say, 10 and 4?
10 and 4, 10 and 5. I'm not picking a number right now, but that's where I'm going with it. And I can be persuaded, depending on what the input is from the other commissioners, but I was thinking at least 5, not 4:30.
And so I will not be persuading you, that I can assure you of. I mean, I'm okay with 10 and 4, and then for the billiard to start at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Without minimizing my concern about the shared restroom, by the way.
We've had these situations many other times in other hearings, and the concern doesn't go away, because I know as well as everybody in this room what happens are the things we don't anticipate.
Can you have, can you impose times that the bathroom can be used?
We can assign a bathroom monitor.
We're talking
Well,
about
it sounds like to me that we want to make the parking reduction permit happen.
Yes.
We are concerned about the shared use of the space, and we want to make sure there's enough time gap happening between the two uses, or the opening hours of the two uses, so there's no overlap, and we can minimize the problem. So I think there's a way we can go forward here.
Shall I make a motion?
Sure.
I'll give it a try. I move that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of current record relative to parking reduction permit case number PPRP 1227790, located at 1113 South Central Avenue, and after having conducted an appeal hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby reverses the planning hearing officer's decision and approves said parking reduction permit case in according with revised findings and this condition, that the, what's the name of the project here?
Kids Playground.
Thank you. The kids' playground will have the hours of 10 till 5, so that the two vehicular uses are at high levels, can be, it's on.
You might be pressing it.
Oh, you're all right. Go ahead. You're okay.
I'm fine.
Sorry.
Wrong number?
This time.
All right, that the kids' playground has the hours of 10 till 5, and that the billiard hall be 6 on, so that that buffer period will allow the two different vehicular uses, when they would be most intense, to not conflict.
Yes.
I would suggest,
Are you going to second and suggest an amendment?
do I have to do it that way?
I think so.
Well, I'm not going to second.
Well,
Okay.
And how about and I think Mr. Astorian had said 10 to 4
Yeah, let me do that. I will second it with an amendment.
with an amendment.
And then that amendment would be, and as I've been thinking through this during the discussion, I was thinking 10 to 4, and then let the billiard hall start at 6. Why don't we let both of them share this and make it 10 to 5, and the billiard hall start at 7? It's just an offer. It doesn't have to, can't do that. It can't affect theirs.
That's already there.
I would like to make it 4 o'clock as the end time. So
Friendly amendment?
that's my amendment to the current.
So you've seconded with your friendly amendment?
Yes.
And I will accept the amendment.
We also had another condition the applicant requested, is to have an hour break.
Well, since we don't really have any recommendations at all in there, if we don't add it, they can have any
Well, I think
break
the
they
staff
want.
had
Is that
recommended
correct?
30 minutes.
We passed out to you the draft findings and the suggested conditions from the planning hearing officer's staff report of November?
But it was denied. You just got it, too.
Yes, you just got it.
Right. The
So,
decision was denied, but the report is still, I mean, the report that was written by the case planner still provided draft conditions of approval. Although the hearing officer did not accept them, that doesn't mean that you might want to consider accepting them. And this is the one that the Ms. Dupremian referred to, where she talked about condition 13 is the one that has the hours of restriction. On that condition, it says that operating hours of the children's indoor playground shall be 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if you wanted to amend that, as well as condition 11, that's where there is a requirement for a minimum 30-minute break. So you may want to increase that to an hour break between events and functions.
Well, can we talk about that? Because a 30-minute break is just a minimum. An hour, whatever they take, if we make it an hour and they don't, and they do it in less than an hour, then that would be more restrictive than necessary. That just seems, I think 30 minutes, you may not want to change it for that reason.
Okay.
So would that be that we would take these conditions and I would modify number 13 to be 10 to 4 p.m.?
Yes, you would want to make sure that it's clear in your motion that you're referring to these conditions of approval and that you would want to modify condition number 13 for the hours as you suggested.
That's what I would like to do. Thank you.
All right, and we have a second already,
Yes.
Mr. Sheets?
Okay, if I may, you also need findings for this.
Okay.
So I assume that the motion would include, subject to the findings contained in the November 14th staff report, the draft findings, and modified in the third paragraph to indicate that the business owner indicates they will operate the business 7 days a week instead of 6.
Where is that?
They ask for 6, right?
You want 7 days?
7?
Where is that a condition right now?
No, sir, it's in the findings.
And the findings are in our
Draft
staff
findings?
report at the
Where are the
top,
findings?
Which staff?
Oh, here.
right here.
I have it.
So,
Well, we do mention in the condition that this is a daily, the times is for daily, isn't that enough?
Well, but
I just want to
Right
correct,
here.
I just want to make sure that the
6 days or
findings
7.
represent the current proposal.
Okay.
yes, so,
Even if you're not going to allow all that they're asking for, it should correctly state what the proposal is.
so that finding, the business owner indicate they will operate the business in 7 days.
7 days a week.
Monday through Sunday, from 10 a.m.
Well, they're proposing
to 4
to,
p.m.
they're proposing 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., and that can stay. You don't have to grant it. I just want their proposal to be.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So we're granting it more than that.
Well, then, how can we make it reflect these findings? We're changing the findings to reflect what we just said, right?
I'm proposing that the finding is that state that the business owner indicate they will operate the business 7 days a week from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's what they are proposing.
Right.
You don't have to grant it, but we're just describing the project proposal here.
And what we suggested and was seconded, that it will be between 11 and 4.
And you are imposing a condition to change that
10 to 4.
proposal.
So it's 11.
So
Okay, so we're just acknowledging the findings and what was proposed, but our conditions are overriding that.
That's right.
Okay, got it. All right, so we've acknowledged it. Can we
Make it
roll?
so.
Can we roll call?
Planning Commissioners Astorian.
yes.
Landrigan.
Yes.
Sheets.
Aye.
Chairperson Yassai.
Yes. Great.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Good job.
we've received a request from one of the applicants here tonight.
Okay.
The applicant who was last on the agenda apparently misunderstood the time at which they were supposed to show up. They showed up this morning at 9:30, which is the time of the planning hearing officers' meetings. And apparently, I've been told that the representative has to make a design presentation in another city tonight, and they have asked if they could be taken out of turn.
Out of turn?
Out of turn meeting right now?
Yes, sir.
Before the second case?
That's right.
Okay.
That's up to the commission.
What is the commission? I would be fine with that, so we can get through that. So are they not available later on? An hour?
That's the idea.
What city?
The applicant has apparently a presentation at 7 in another city. So there are the church operators are here, but the applicant will not be available at 7. They've got the other presentation.
Okay, well, what about the current applicant? The one we will be actually seeing?
Next.
They're here?
Well, both the applicant and the church representative are here.
Okay.
The applicant has the other presentation.
Okay.
So they're not here.
They're here now. They will not be here to make the other hearing starting at 7. I don't know what time the applicant needs to leave.
Okay, well, our next item, the parking reduction permit, case number PPRP, the 113 South Central Avenue, wasn't that a case that we had to just vote on because we were missing?
We just
I'm sorry,
heard. You mean the
15.
515?
I'm sorry, the 515 South Glendale one.
It's the same, correct. You just have to decide on whether or not.
No more new presentations. It was continued,
I
It
don't.
was continued because there was a tie
Just
in
needed-
our votes, right?
but they also
We
wanted-
also wanted to review the parking study that was submitted that day, and we did, and the applicant submitted a revised one, which you should have received,
Okay.
and it's dated April 12th.
Okay. Well, I have 4 cards for the San Fernando.
Which one are we hearing now?
we would have to
I mean,
vote.
we have to.
Or is that the
just-
chairman's
vote
pleasure?
on if we want to
It's the chairman's pleasure.
bring the San Fernando case up forward or not. And I have 4 cards for it.
It's
so
your pleasure.
I think
Chair.
we could move. I think we could go ahead and hear it since we have more people waiting for that anyway. So let's do that. And what would I have to do to rearrange that? Can we just jump forward?
Your wish is our command, sir.
Okay. So let's hear the new business parking exception case number PPEX 1231816. This is a property located on 4551 San Fernando Road, and we have a case report for that, please.
Good evening. Nardi and Associates is proposing to locate His Life City Church in an existing building located at 4551 San Fernando Road. The existing building contains approximately 21,000 square feet on the ground level and 11,000 square feet on the second level, and there are 56 on-site parking spaces. The church is proposing to occupy 2 tenant spaces, which is approximately 1,200 square feet on the second floor of the building and combine them into one space. On March 7th of this year, the planning hearing officer approved with conditions a conditional use permit to allow the church in an IMU zone. Churches are a conditionally permitted use in that zone. The planning hearing officer approved that. Also on March 7th of this year, the Director of Community Development approved with conditions a parking exception for 29 parking spaces in conjunction with the conditional use permit. An appeal regarding this approval, the approval of the parking exception, was submitted on March 21st. The Community Development Director's approval of the parking exception was based on a number of items, and those are found in the staff report that was sent to you all. But they included in summary that there was no vacant area on the site to locate additional parking spaces, nor could the parking be more efficiently designed to accommodate more spaces. The hours of the operation of the church, the feasibility of sharing the 56 spaces of on-site parking, and then staff site visits. The appellant bases their appeal by citing 2 counts of misrepresentation by the applicant, including a claim that the major tenant on the first level of the building authorizes use of the 28 spaces during weekend hours, and the second misrepresentation was the working hours of level 2 tenants were Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Staff supports approval of the parking exception as conditioned and believes that the findings can be made affirmatively as detailed in the Community Development Director's approval letter. Since filing the appeal, staff has visited the site on a number of occasions, and those observations are contained in the staff report. Additionally, staff visited the site this past Saturday at about 7:20 p.m. and then on Sunday at about 1:20 p.m. and found that the site was locked with maybe 1 or 2 cars seen in the parking lot. Staff believes that as conditioned, particularly with regard to limiting the operating hours of the church to after 7 p.m. on weekdays and on Saturday, while allowing them all day on Sunday, and the presence of a security guard when the church is in operation, that the church can locate on the subject site without providing the parking required and without infringing on the existing tenants. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Ms. Landrigan?
When was the after 7 p.m. Added to this? After staff reviewed it, is that a...
That was an initial, the Community Development Director's approval letter included that as a condition.
So that wasn't a nexus based upon what was brought up by the neighbors? It kind of came in the story afterwards, so I'm asking if...
That was based on a we received a letter from the property management firm, and that should have been in your packet, and we received the letter prior to the decision, the Community Development Director's decision, which detailed the business names, their operating hours, and their number of employees. And what I did with that is looked at that and said, okay, it looks like most of these places are closed by 7 p.m. And so that's where the condition on restricting the hours of the church to no earlier than 7 p.m. came in.
During the weekend on Saturdays?
Right.
Thank you.
Sure. This space is on the second level, right?
The tenant space that they wish to locate it in is on the second level.
Is it vacant?
It's currently vacant, yeah.
Great. Any other comments?
I do have a question. What's the logic behind security for a church? Security guard for a church? And what was the reason? What prompted that?
Well, a couple things. During the initial public hearing, there was some concern from other tenants about, the church operating without any, being the only operator on the site, and I thought a security guard might help alleviate those concerns. Number one. Number two, there are 2 gates accessing the site. There's one gate just immediately adjacent to the sidewalk, and then probably 50 or 60 feet in, there's another gate that accesses the ground level tenants and parking, and the security guard is required so that, or would be required so that those gates are unlocked and opened when the church is operating.
Because they have to use the parking and so forth for the first level parking.
Correct.
Okay. But the 4551 San Fernando does have, right now, how are they handling it? They have a security guard, the building has a security guard?
You know, I don't know for sure. You'd have to ask the applicant, but I believe there was one time I visited that I think I observed a security guard. I know I spoke with a manager of the first level tenant. They do have a security guard station right next to the second gate. I don't know whether it's manned all the time or when it's manned.
So this security guard is not, its sole purpose is not to keep the parishioners on the straight, right?
No, the security guard in the condition that was included in the approval letter was only when the church was in operation, and it was also part of their role would be logistically to make sure the gates are unlocked and opened, so parking could be accessed.
Thank you.
So, just continue that. Was this a staff suggestion, or was it something that they decided to do in addition to the existing security that's there?
This came up during the public hearing for the conditional use permit, and in writing the approval letter for the parking exception, it was included at that time.
By staff?
By staff, yes.
Okay, well, let's move on and let's see if there's no other questions that we can hear from the applicant himself, or the... Can we have, I have Norberto Nardi, and I also have Larsen Lopez as a church rep. So you'll have 15 minutes between the two of you to give your presentation.
Actually, before I start, you did receive a couple letters regarding this case on your desks.
Right. Great. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Norberto Nardi. I'm located in 805 Shamrock Avenue in Monrovia. And by the way, thank you, commissioners, for granting me the opportunity to go to the other planning commission hearing. You know, I am, even though I'm the applicant, in reality, my role in this project is I am the architect. So I'm normally I kind of travel from city to city to make presentations, and today happens that both hearings are at the same time and almost in the same day. So I was misunderstanding. I thought that first we were not going to hear the appeal, but and we are going to retort it. But let me tell you what I found out in addition of the information provided by the staff. I've been observing as well the place. I am not a researcher. I'm just a visual observant of the condition of the place. And essentially, the church has been told to us will fundamentally operate on Sundays. That's why they have no problems at all in accepting the condition to eventually have an access after 7 p.m. because their services are on Sunday exclusively. My understanding is a very small community, and clearly the parking requirements and with the visual observation plus the reports that we got from the facility manager, where he stated repeatedly in several statements and letters and written statements, plus including, and that was one of the concerns, by the way, of the staff, that they attach leases, which are kind of a privilege of the relationship between the tenants and the office and the facility manager, where in a clear indication is that, in our understanding, is not a conflict at all in between the use by the church and the availability of parking after 7 p.m. and definitely not on Sunday, as the staff report already stated and quoted. So we sustain that this is a friendly use. When I was listening to the previous discussions about sharing bathrooms, that I understand your concern, commissioners, and I realized that in any case, even that a church, as we unfortunately know, not necessarily ensure a full, always impeccable behavior, but we assume that there are not conflict, at least in that area, that will occur in this use. So we are reinforcing our petition that this is not only an acceptable use, but it's not creating any additional conflicts for the parking. And as I said before, one of the fundamental reasons is the small community, because they are a family church, so they are normally coming from several directions and carpooling, which means that even the true parking needs will be much less than the 29 or 31 spaces indicated in the code as emerging of a requirement for the kind of use that they are proposing. So if you have any additional question, the project is quite simple. It is in reality the conversion of 2 tenant spaces. We went through the process already of building permit application until the appeal appeared, so we were already moving ahead with the process. Where they didn't find any conflict, building code-wise, towards the proposal that we're using. That's an additional information that in reality doesn't change the fact of this appeal, but just to let you know that we kept moving after the initial approval with building permits. But, when the appeal appeared, we have to stop that process. The last plea, and I'm not neither a member of the church or directly affected by this process, but this individual had been in this process for a long time, even carrying the burden of reserving a space for a use, which is not your responsibility at all, but truly they are looking for a sort of a solution and looking for the house for their own church. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So you're
the applicant.
I am the applicant, yes.
the appellant?
Should the appellant go first?
That's what I was asking. That's what I said when I
I
started
know
with
that.
my...
Is that right?
Do they get
Actually, I haven't done an appeal in a while, so
Yeah.
let's look to Laura.
That was my question, yeah.
Normally, the appellant goes first, then the applicant, because this is
That's
because
what
it's not the
that's what I
same
asked.
person. And then it's the reverse at the end. It's the applicant, and then the final person who speaks is the appellant.
Okay.
Appellant starts and the appellant finishes.
Okay, so
Let's fix it.
we'll change that. Thank you. Well, since you're up here, do we have any questions for him?
Nothing now.
Okay. What are exactly the hours of the operation?
The other operations,
Yeah.
Of the church.
For
you mean of the church?
Yeah.
They will be, Lester, Sunday, 10 to 11:30 on Sundays.
10 to 11:30
On Sundays.
on Sundays?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's it? An hour and a half?
Just for the whole week?
An hour and a half a week.
There's no other use, there's no
No
other...
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
Unless we
Come
just
up.
have like a meeting.
Please speak into the microphone.
Please speak
And
in,
introduce yourself.
and
Introduce.
introduce your name as well.
I'm Larsen Lopez. I'm the church administrator. I live at 5712 Faculty Avenue, Lakewood, California. And to answer your question, the church operating hours will be 10 to 11:30. We're very strict with the hours. And in some cases, we come in there like 9 o'clock just to pray, just for like 2 cars with our pastor and just for like 2 elders, something like that. And then in most cases, I don't think we're there because our members are from different places. Like me, I'm from Lakewood. Other churches, other members are from Carson, Reseda. Some are in the Valley area. So instead of doing our meeting during the weekdays in the church, we'd rather call and do a conference call.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, on that after 7 p.m. during the week, Monday to Saturday, we're not visibly there at the church.
Just after 7 p.m. if you need to use it.
Yeah.
Is that-
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Lopez, you have in here that it would be available after 7 o'clock for church use. So, can you give me an example of what kind of activities? Would you have a fundraiser? You know, I'm a Catholic, we have bingo.
No, definitely not.
Thing
Because
like
we're
that.
focusing, we are the church that love God, makes disciples, and impact the world. That's who we are. And by impacting the world, what we stated there is true, and we're into righteousness. And in some cases, like the 7 o'clock p.m. that you're stating, I really don't think that we may do those things.
Well, I'm not worried about it. I'm just curious
yeah.
as to sort of
Probably,
what
if
kind of
not,
activities you might have
Just meeting.
that would have a
Just the
parking
pastoral
impact.
meeting.
Just that's the question.
Just pastoral meeting.
I'm sorry. When he's referring, because I asked a question when we were participating in the early process of this project. Well, they told me that very rarely during the week, 2 or 3 members of the church, if they are in the area, that potentially can meet. They don't have services. In other words, if the analysis that I presume they have to be done to evaluate the parking request is based in a full attendance, which is the services, they don't have services Monday through Saturday, 0. So the only services occur on Sunday. That's very clearly stated.
Great. Okay, let's have the appellant up. Thank you, guys. And I have one card. Well, Oppo Jabarian, I believe, is the appellant, and James Boggs, and I have cards from both of them. So I think we have 15 minutes between the two. Yeah. And our apologies that we didn't have you guys first, since you're the
We're
actual
supposed to
applicant.
go first, and then them, and then
Yeah.
us again?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll have a rebuttal period.
Okay.
If I might, there seems to be a question with the other speaker as far as, might be about the timing.
And I
Do you
think.
need to- do they need to straighten
Well,
that out?
I think James Bogg and I think Oppo Jabarian and James Boggs are both listed as the appellants. So both of you have 15 minutes between the two of you.
I believe didn't Jeff fill out? No, you didn't fill out? Okay.
Yeah.
Amy? No?
You can, if you want to speak, you need to.
Yeah. If you want to speak, please fill out a card, and then you'll have a chance to speak as well. Thanks. Go ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission, city staff. My name is Apo Jabarian. I'm one of the tenants of the building located at 4551 San Fernando Road on level 2, unit number 208 and 217. Out of 18 units, presently 16 are occupied, and out of the entire level downstairs on level 1, 100% is occupied. So we're talking about a building that has nearly 90% occupancy rate. So you could envision how much of a lacking parking space, lack of parking space is already emerging when we take into consideration the fact that this church, this proposed tenant, needs at least 31 car parking spaces, and they only have available 2, so they have a shortfall of 29. So with the 90% occupancy rate, I don't know how that shortfall will be remedied or can be remedied. Contrary to the building manager's or the landlord's letter in which he's claiming that he would demand, quote unquote, demand the existing tenants to modify their usage of parking and abstain from parking on Sundays or any other hours like after the hours, that's absurd because I, for one, like many of us, we have Jeff, we have Arlen, we have Jamie, we have Tim, and we have Rosanna. So many of us tenants have the understanding that we could use the parking spaces at any time, 24/7, 365. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, contrary to the city staff's findings that there were only a few cars parked during the time frame that they were there Saturday at 7 p.m., many of the tenants, and some of them are here, actually do use their car parking spaces on Sundays, Saturdays, after business hours. So initially, the applicants made two misrepresentations to the effect of having the entire car parking spaces available on level 1 downstairs and most of the level 2 car parking spaces available based on the false notion that many tenants work from Monday to Friday from 9 to 5 and they don't work on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays. So these two misrepresentations are proven to be misrepresentations by a number of signed statements by current tenants refuting the misrepresentations that the car parking spaces may be available after 5 p.m. weekdays and Saturdays and Sundays. So level 1 tenant in direct rebuttal, he wrote that he would not allow anybody park downstairs at any time, just like the tenants upstairs. Many of the tenants are flabbergasted as to why the building management refused to make the space available to another tenant. So, you know, we as tenants are for 100% occupancy rate. So when many of us discussed about the possibility of having an influx of 80 plus people at a given time in a building structure that is not designed to host 80 people in one single small unit that has the size approximately of this space right here. So we're talking about 80 plus members of the church attending. So during the last meeting, the administrator of the church, the applicant, was not responsive to a question presented by one of the tenants, which I passed on. Are the members of the church former alcoholics or drug abusers? We have nothing against them. You know, like we're all for rehabilitation. Everybody has the right, the birthright for a second opportunity. But is this the right place for it? That's the question. So maybe that's why they needed to know how many members of the church are, undergoing treatment, and they have the right. We support that. But is this the right location for it? So maybe that's why. Actually, just during last week, there was a burglary in our location. So there was a theft. A filing cabinet, which was put outside of the units behind the locked gates, one of them was stolen. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission, are you aware of the rebuttal letters from existing tenants in the file? And also, are you aware that in the original opposition to this application, the existing tenants submitted photographs of the building, including photographs of the rundown restrooms, which is a restroom for both ladies and gentlemen for common use. And did you notice a photograph of a door lock that was broken by an unauthorized user coming from outside? So I would like to encourage you to look deep and hard into the facts. Even if they don't use the parking, we will still have the issue of a huge influx of human beings into a building structure that cannot accommodate. Please look carefully at the driveways. Please be informed that on a given day, and I would like to have the city staff to visit the property during lunch times to see how many people are roaming on the driveways. And that's a safety hazard. So would any one of us be held responsible for an accident that could happen at any given time? So an accident can happen in a second or 10 seconds. What if we have an influx of 80 people at a given time, let's say on a Sunday, and one of us, the tenants, who are known to be using the units 24/7, not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, but 24/7. I know Jeff comes in like sometimes at 8 p.m. Saturday, because I'm there. Sometimes he comes in at 11 p.m. I know Arlen at unit number 213, Arlen? 14. He comes in at 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. Sunday or Saturday or 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. So that's one important point that I would like to encourage you to look into. And one other thing, like I said, this is a letter from then existing tenant who is no longer a tenant. We lost him. He was a great tenant. He was right next door to us. You know, as a remedy of the 10% non-occupancy rate, because of the growth of his business, he offered to lease extra space, and he was turned down. So, thank you.
Thank you. How much more time do we have?
I can't.
Okay, well, does
But he had two people.
Yeah, does Mr. James Boggs want to take up any more of this time?
I can. I don't need much. Hi, I'm James Boggs. I live in. I rent out 214, which is adjacent to the two units that we're talking about, where the church wants to move into. And my hours fluctuate. I'm there mostly at night because of other day other things. It's really hot there in the afternoon, so I have to work there at nights a lot of times. But I pay $50 a month. My parking spot is leased to me. It's just like my unit. I lease the parking spot, and I'm there at all hours, and I'm there on Sundays. And I was looking at the letter that the building manager wrote, and it's very vague from where it says no way this or very little during the week or a few hours on Saturday. I mean, I don't really understand what that means, but there's only 27 parking spots up top in the upper unit. The downstairs unit is like a garment. They make garments for some big designers or something, and they have another security guard gate right there, but I never see a security guard. I just don't feel like this is a good marriage for us. I mean, for me or the church, really, because I don't want to be disruptive to their services or anything like that, and I have nothing against the church. But I just know that the parking situation is extremely difficult, even during normal hours. But there's a handful of us there who are not there during normal hours, and I mean, to have to, that's the saving grace of being in that unit is working there after hours like I do, and I would hate to be disruptive for the church. I have power tools. I have loud music. I have all that stuff. I'm not disruptive in any way, but if I have, a church there that are, conducting services, it would be very difficult for me to operate my unit. And the fact that, that my parking space is basically being leased out again after I'm paying on the lease. I'm paying for this, and I'm also paying for the security of that gate being shut. I mean, that's another great thing about the unit being there at night is we have a security gate that I had to go. We all had to go and purchase clickers to open this gate up and get the program for everybody. And I made the concern is like, well, is the congregation going to have to all purchase clickers to get in the gate? And then maybe that's where the security guard thing came up. Well, the church will supply a security guard to stand out there. But the letter that was sent to Mr. Kiesel from Reed, our project manager, and from what I just heard from the church themselves saying, well, we're just only going to be there on Sunday from this time and this time, whereas obviously the property manager doesn't know about those hours either, because in his letter he's stating a few hours here, a few hours there. In no way it's going to impede on the other people's parking, and I think there's just a lot of miscommunication going on, a lot of information that's not accurate, and so that's all that's all I was hoping to say to you guys.
You mentioned you have space. Do you have assigned parking space?
Yes, I do.
So other tenants can't actually park on that assigned space?
No, they're not supposed to, but the tenants also have they have clients, they have customers, they have people that come pick up things. They don't know that and we've kind of got it worked out to where you don't run up to, hey, you're in my spot. It's not like that.
So you have one assigned space?
One, yeah.
One assigned space, and so you always have a guaranteed parking space.
I'm supposed to.
Yeah. Well, if you don't, you can always complain and
I could complain. Yeah, I could complain, but I pay for one assigned parking place. Okay.
And then every tenant has their own assigned space?
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
So that's what kind of bothered me is like, well, they're double leasing. Are they paying? Why should I pay $50 a month for this parking spot if I'm not there regular 9 to 5 hours?
Right. Thanks. Do we have any more questions?
No, that's very good. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have two more speakers. Can we have Jeff Kane come up, please?
Just for clarification, is this also part of the appellant, or is this a different?
This is a tenant, and it's a speaker card. They're not listed as an appellant.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is
3
Jeff
minutes?
Kane.
3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Should be fine. I'm a tenant in Unit 215, and I, as every other tenant, has in my lease, I have the right to use a parking space anytime I want, which it's stated so in the lease. The only thing I would address is I see this only as just a parking issue because it's about a parking exemption, and I'm just looking at the numbers. If true that the GSA, which is the single tenant of the first floor, has refused to allow any of their spaces to be used, they have a separate gate and they keep it locked. My understanding is 56. There's 27 upstairs, 29 downstairs. If you remove from the upstairs the 2 that the church has or allowed per their lease, or they would be, that leaves 25 spaces. So now you have 25 spaces, a 29 parking space exemption, and all these other tenants up there. And the other thing is this being on the second floor, there's a driveway you have to drive up. Anytime I come there, I usually have a van. I need some place to park to get to my unit. If I end up in a situation, the first floor is locked because the tenant downstairs won't allow parking. if that's true, and it seems to be. So I would find myself parking on San Fernando and walking up a ramp, carrying whatever I would, and in and out. I mean, it's conceivable, because if you have 80 congregants, which and I don't have any problems with whatever the church is permitted to do per zoning and any other conditions. But I don't see how the conditions of this exemption can be met based on removing the first floor spaces from the equation. That's all I'd say. Thank you very much.
Do you have an assigned space
Yes,
yourself
yes.
that no one can?
Well, it's not. It doesn't have my name on the space,
Okay.
but I do have, as every lease that, well, at least I know mine does. It states that I have the use of a space.
But it's shared among the other tenants. Is that how it is?
Well, it's not supposed to be, man. I mean, it does have my number there, but
Okay.
as
No
Arlen
one
said as
can
well.
park there except for you.
Well,
Well,
conceivably,
if
yeah,
someone
I
else
could
parks there, you
raise
could-
the issue.
You
Yeah.
could raise that. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
But among the tenants that are there daily, the existing tenants, there's just, it kind of, it
There's some-
flows like that because, as Arlen said, people have customers and there's different types of tenants up there.
Right.
So.
Mr. Historian?
I do. And I don't have to go into this, but are the spaces numbered?
Yeah, they are numbered, yes.
And in your lease, it says number so-and-so belongs to you for that space.
No, it does not.
So then you don't have an assigned lease, sir.
Okay.
You don't have a assigned parking. It's a parking that they provide for you that is available to everybody else to park. Now, you may have, unless it's written in the lease that this space belongs to this unit number, there is no assigned parking. I mean, if you have that, then you do have an assigned parking.
Yeah, no, I understand, and that that's probably true. But, I just, the spirit of the exemption would seem that you would forfeit parking for all other tenants on that floor for one tenant. Now, I know that's an issue between the tenants and the landlord, but just in the numbers alone, I don't see how you...
Does your lease, is part of your lease a statement that says you will have a parking space? Are you
Yes,
paying
correct.
for a parking space?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it sounds like there's
That's
parking
fine.
on
A
the
space.
site, but you don't have a specific assigned parking as
Well,
we just-
there's my number on, there's a
Right.
sign that says Unit 214 in front of the space, but, does it say in the lease? that
You'll have your shot. As
Anyway.
Okay, great. Thanks.
May
Uh,
I ask,
yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may
Well,
have Ms.
He's going to be up for a rebuttal. Can we have Jamie Adams, please? Hello.
Jamie Adams. I'm in space number 203. A couple of things I'd clarify. One of the things initially that about the gate downstairs, because it's the only access to the entire place, just to explain it, because it seems like there was a little confusion about it. It's the electric gate. It's only for cars to drive through, so I think that was one of the concerns of the tenants there, is that the space will have to be left, the door will have to be left open for, I guess, a long period of time, and you have to have a security guard stand down there and vet who's coming in and out of the space. And if there's no parking downstairs, if that's really off the table now, it becomes a little complicated, because there's no doorway down there. Even if you have to park on the street, you have to have somebody, taking your identification or knowing who's going in and out. I think that it sounds like it's basically a parking issue. Some of us, like me, I'm an artist. I have a day job, so I work up there at night a lot. And I think there might be sort of a fear of a kind of attrition, like over time. There might be, like a year from now, like 40 cars just parked all over the place, and it'll be too late to really do anything about that. And I think in my lease, it is this, the number of my space has a corresponding numbered parking lot that goes with it. If I recall, I've been up there about 4 or 5 years. And there have been many notes from the landlord about keeping in your space, making sure you don't park in other people's spaces. There have been disputes about it several years ago, about when there were lots of people up there. So I think, and the gate downstairs to me is a big issue, because it opens out. There's a ramp that goes right upstairs to to where our spaces are. And it's kind of narrow, and it's a narrow turn to turn around where the church is going to be, right near where James is. It's like sort of a corner right there. I mean, if there's a lot of people milling around or having to be there. Otherwise, we don't have a problem with the church or anything else. It's just about parking and also finding out that it was the person downstairs really wasn't allowing his space to be used. Apparently, from what I've been told, he never agreed to let his spaces be used. And the last finding said they had to have 31 spaces, supposedly. And the hours of the church, I got concerned about in the other approval because it was more than I thought it was going to be. I think it was 6 days a week or something like that. It was more than just like Sunday and I don't know when the services were going to be or when they're supposed to be up there. So, and that there were going to be 80 people up there at any given time. Because there aren't that many people ever really up there at the same time. That's all.
And your understanding is you have one spot?
Yes, I have one spot. The spaces, they seem to go with the size of the space you have. So I have one of the smaller spaces, so I get one spot.
And
my next door neighbor has two spaces. He has like a 1,200, 1,000 square foot space. So he has two spaces numbered 202. So the spaces go with the size of the space. So the church, I presume, would have two spaces. For them,
you have your unit number on the space?
Yes. Yeah. All the spaces have the number of the units attached to them.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the business hour, now that you know the Sunday operation of between 11 till 1,
it depends. Like I'm not always up there, so it's like you could come on a Sunday and it could be really quiet up there. You know, it's serious. You know, at nighttime it can be too. But I think everyone's worried that over time, if you came up there on a Sunday, there's no place to park, or there might be, or all the space, the place will be filled with cars. I don't know. It's a little unknown, I think.
Great. Thanks very much.
Sure, thank you.
All right. I don't have any more speaker cards. Could we have a rebuttal?
What?
No, I'm sorry.
I believe we want the applicant.
Aren't they supposed to go first? Because we're the appellants.
Well, they already went up.
And so did the appellant, but we need to have the applicant back now.
Yeah, I believe it's the applicant, and then the last person who speaks is the appellant.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so let's have the applicant up, and they'll have 3 minutes? Or how?
A rebuttal.
5 minutes?
It's 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you. Before I want to give some arguments for the rebuttal, I want to make clear that we understand that there are two circumstances right here tonight. One is the frustration or disappointment of some of the members of the tenant member towards the business operation, which is our opponent have nothing to do with that. Okay, so in some extent, I want to be sure that we don't get caught in the middle of a dispute that is not necessarily for the request for parking exception. The second issue that I want to point out is this gentleman, the last proponent, or the last, a person that talks about in the appeal group, he mentioned about the gate and the operation. I think the whole story and the whole proposal of the staff when they were related to the idea to have a guard, it was exactly to take care of that. So that process, which is going to be paid by the church, is ensuring that the guard would be front of the gate with the control of the gate, and be sure that the people that are coming in and out are, number one, representing the church, and number two, being guided to the way that they should be to the available spaces. The third issue that is not relevant to the appeal, but I want to make a comment about that. The current space that they are proposing to lease, it has a bathroom already incorporated inside. So the impact on the existing facilities, that is true, they are in a little state of disarray. are not necessarily being impacted by the use of the church because the church is providing a bathroom within the facilities, which is very important. So this is a third component that I want to express. And the last one, which I'm not really sure about that, but when the facilities manager made the presentation for the CUP, appears to be that he said and state, I haven't seen the leases, that they are not assigned spaces per se. And I don't want to argue about that. I'm repeating what he stated, and I think actually he put it in writing, and I think it's part of the document that probably the Planning Commission is receiving. So that's my my contribution, and the rest of the time probably will be used by the church, and I need to apologize, but I have to go to the other public hearing. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I do have a question for Mr. Nardi.
Yes.
You mentioned when you were here a few minutes ago that 30 or so will be attending the Sunday services. I'm hearing the number 80.
No. I said that given that they are carpooling, they are families. They capacity, the design capacity for the rooms are for a maximum of 80 people. This is true. I didn't change that number. The number quoted on all the code compliance is based in an assembly capacity of 80. What I mentioned about 30 was saying that assuming the way that the church operates, that as a fact, they never will have 80 cars. That was the point. That's what I meant. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
It's just that we were impacting the world by, if there's like these conditions, and if we're needed to put a guard, we'll be doing that. And if we're requested to put like a cone for each of those opposing tenant, we will do that as long as we maintain like peace and everything is in order in our facility, because of course we want to be a blessing to them. And I know we bless them. We bless these people in that community, and we know provisions, promotions be upon all of us there. And we're a church who just simply wants to share the love of God. And our goal is, of course, to show to them, and of course we just definitely show what's our vision is. It's in my heart is I just love God and just sharing the word of God, and I'm all in it. I will follow or any conditions that will be decided here, and I know the favor of the Lord is upon us because I have a big God. I believe in a big God. I don't really rebut or something.
Thank you.
So just one more time, the hours you are actually operating, you said it'll be 11:30 till...
No, it's 10 to 11:30. That's the church operation time. And probably will be there like me as an administrator and our pastor by 9 o'clock so as to just pray.
The congregation is
But the
10 to
congregation will
11:30.
come in like 10 to 10 minutes before 10. And then after that, we really don't do like special events. We're not after two special events.
So the rest of the days, it's your maximum use of parking will be one or a couple.
Yes.
Just
For pastoral
just like the other
meeting.
tenants.
Yes.
One or two
Yes.
parking spaces.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, sir. Has the landlord, the same way that has assigned parking to 3 or 4 of the tenants by the power of their testimony, have they assigned parking spaces to your lease?
They just told us that we have 2 parkings.
You have signed the lease, subject to
Not
this.
yet, because it's all drafted, and he just told me that we have like 2 parkings.
And is that your understanding from what you've read in the lease, that you have an assigned parking or just 2 parkings?
2 parkings.
2 parking spaces.
Yes.
But then on certain hour for Sunday, you have the use of more than 2 parking spaces.
That's what the landowner told us.
Is it in the lease?
I believe so. I
That-
can. I think Roger. Do you have that agreement? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great,
you.
thanks. Mr. Jabarian, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for the second opportunity, and thank you, Pastor, for the blessings as we need them, and for the love of God. Maybe it's better to find another suitable location. If we go back to October 22nd, 2012, we have a letter from the building management, Lilly Properties, adamantly condemning tenants having their clients park in fellow tenants' parking spaces. So as you may see, this industrial commercial use building is not designed for retail or congregation. It's designed for the tenants' strict use in terms of parking and the general common areas such as the restrooms. So if you would like, I could pass on this document to you saying it has been brought to our attention that a few tenants at the building are parking in parking spaces which are assigned for use by other tenants. This occurring during the week as well as on weekends. Please respect your fellow tenants and park only in the parking spaces which are assigned for your use. Vehicles improperly parked will be subject to citations and towing. So that answers the question about assigned parking. Commissioner Asturian, thank you for the question. So that clarifies it. So basically we're dealing with a situation where we have nearly 90% occupancy rate in terms of parking and space usage, and we have a need of at least 75% of that already occupied parking spaces by a new tenant who promises to bring in hordes of cars and also a great congregation. So that's the premise of our opposition. We love all the religious establishments. They have beautiful missions to accomplish. We're supportive of their mission. But this location is not designed to withhold the influx, a large influx of people and cars at one time. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Do we have
Any questions?
All right.
No? Any questions? Okay, great.
I
Thank
do
you.
have one question.
Okay.
Did the manager ever approach the tenants about like a public meeting and say, we're going to be having, I'm trying to get a tenant in here?
Not to
So
my
there
knowledge.
was no discussion before you all heard about the parking exemption?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
And have you talked to the manager to try to solve this problem?
He's not well receptive. He has even increased our rents. Yeah, he did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. All right, do we have any other questions and comments to staff?
I have no more comments, no.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Mr. Kiesel, how many people attended the hearing that were not the landlord and the church? Did all of these gentlemen here?
I think for the most part, yeah. There was a gentleman here earlier today with his daughter, I think. He was also at the hearing. But it was roughly this many people attended.
Okay.
And on the management side and owner side, that was consisted of
Mr. Slovis.
the building manager.
Yeah, I believe he was at the hearing as well.
The question, the presentation that we heard today from the applicants, that they had, building spaces, their parking space was part of their lease, and Mr. Gregorian's indication that he was not willing to make his spaces available, was that brought up to you, or did this information come with the appellant's package?
That was presented at the public hearing for the conditional use permit.
Okay.
Um,
Do you want to hear the...
There was a miscommunication.
you want to come up and explain it?
I was at the hearing.
I never closed.
Initially, I think there was a miscommunication here. Initially, the document signed by GSA simply stated their hours of operation. That's it. And that was presented at that meeting. You will see it in your documents. And Mr. Kiesel, I believe, is referring to that particular document. So the letter, the follow-up letter, which is March 2nd, March 20th, was way after the meeting, signed by GSA, Mr. Gregorian, categorically declining to authorize usage or even access to their parking space. So that's the clarification that I would like to bring to your attention.
You have your own space.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And if someone
208 and 217.
and if someone parks at that space,
I will immediately call the cops and have them write a citation and tow them away.
so if you have your own space,
Absolutely.
So what is your concern if another tenant is parking in other spaces? If you have a space that you can always park in,
Yeah. Well,
why are you concerned that you will be affected?
my concerns are numerous. So if I go through the list of concerns, we would be here for another 15 minutes. If I'm granted another 15 minutes, I would be willing to go through the list of concerns.
If you can answer my
but to
question,
simplify the concerns and bring them down to one little...
He has one question.
Just one question is:
Yes.
you're concerned that you might not be able to use those two parking spaces, but you have the access to those parking spaces indefinitely, always.
My answer is this. Presently, under present conditions, we already have parking problem. We already do. So this letter dated October 22nd, 2012 attests to that. So we have parking problem. We already have. Even with my own assigned parking spaces, I still have individuals coming and parking in my parking spaces.
Okay. So, but you can always tow.
Absolutely.
You can tow those. Okay, got it. Thanks, Mr. Foy. I think you had a question, or you had a comment.
A couple of comments. There was some request by the applicant that the hours actually start a little bit earlier, that they might be allowed to be open for individual prayer a few hours earlier than what they had suggested to us in the application. And that I would just suggest that would be very difficult to monitor, how many people are using it, that it's not being used to full capacity at that time.
Agreed. Plus, it's unknown. It's sometimes. There's no specific
that part
time.
made me a little uncomfortable. Secondly, obviously there's some confusion here with, or miscommunication at least, between the building owner and his tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, if someone has agreed with their landlord that they get a certain parking space, that's a matter between them. The city doesn't really enforce that. I mean, it's a civil matter between them. And
All right.
I guess lastly, I'd like to say that we do have a provision in the code that says, that if you're in control of a premises, that you can't prohibit your lawful tenants from parking there. We put that in for some buildings where, a landlord might say, oh, I don't want any of your employees parking here, or I don't want your customers parking here. So, this is kind of a similar situation, that if someone is a lawful tenant there, they shouldn't be prevented by the landlord from parking.
Right.
What's the provision, the number, and the section on that one?
It is 30.32 040C1.
Are you making a note of this, Mr. Javari? Can you read that provision one more time, Mr.
Sure.
Ford?
Persons in control of the operation of a premises for which parking or loading spaces are required by this chapter shall not prevent, prohibit, or restrict other persons from using those spaces for their required parking.
On a continuous basis?
That's what the code is.
On a continuous basis. It doesn't say on a continuous basis.
I'm not here to argue with
Well,
you.
it's
On
not on
special
the-
occasions?
Excuse me.
I just
Let him
asked-
speak.
Ask you to
If he
sit
asks
down.
you a question, you can answer it.
I just asked you to take note or to take note of the number.
I'm already aware of that. On special occasions, the landlord writes a letter.
Excuse me.
Good. We're good.
We'll,
good?
if we need any more
Thank you.
answers, we'll
Thank you.
ask you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess the last point I'd like to make is when someone does request parking and they say that parking is available, we just don't take it at face value. I mean, as you've seen in the other case tonight, we went out and did spot checks. On this particular application, Roger's been out at least half a dozen times. I myself went out one weekend evening about 8 p.m., and it certainly looked like the whole building was shut down, and there was plenty of parking available. There was a worker at the building next door, so I asked him, is this typical? Is it usually this quiet at night, or is it usually more bustling? He said, oh, no, it's always quiet. So, I mean, that's the basis on which we approved this parking exception, was our own observations over a number of occasions that, by all appearances, there was plenty of parking at night and on the weekends.
Mr. Foy, can you tell us what is the total parking again in that whole complex?
It's 56, I believe.
56?
Yeah, just give me a second and I'll...
And Mr. Floyd, can you give me that number 32040?
C1.
C1, thank you.
56.
56 spaces. And do you know how many of them are actually assigned for tenants?
No, I know that there are 29 on the ground level and 27 on the second level.
29.
The building is 38,000 square feet. 38,900 square.
34.
34,000.
Okay.
I should have known.
No,
It's
I'm
an
sorry.
industrial, that's why it's 1 per thousand.
32. I should say 32.
1 per thousand.
Okay.
Roughly.
And also regarding bathrooms and the like, they'll have to get permission from Building and Safety to change occupancy categories, at which time any required improvements in bathrooms or exiting will have to be made.
Great. Yeah, let me we'll close the public hearing and we'll enter deliberation now, unless there's any other comments. Okay. Great. Mr. Sheets?
Start. Wow. To me, this is very confusing from the standpoint that, I mean, we're used to hearing conflicting stories, but this goes deeper. For me, tenants have rights, they have precedent, they have rights to use the parking spaces, and we have some clarity around their legal rights, their leases. We have some clarity and specificity around what they get when they lease the property. That, to me, is clear. What is not clear to me is, and not specific for a number of reasons, is what, when, and how the church will use the property. And it's not about the church to me, it's about the parking and about the usage. So, we've had recent appeals and recent requests for parking variances that required specific parking studies. What I've heard here is not specific parking studies, it's word of mouth, it's subjective, and to me, not conclusive. So, I mean, reading the findings, I see there's an effort here to make a situation where we do allow a usage to occur, which I think is great. But I put that up against what exists and what the rights are of the people there today, and just based on the fact that we're talking about the parking, I don't see findings here to allow some unknown amount of parking to occur at not specific times, and then there's just a whole myriad of issues. There's the gate, and there's clickers on the gate, and there's guards that will direct parking. Many things that to me are subjective and not specific, and I don't understand how they would clearly and specifically accommodate and or mitigate parking issues that could really happen if this occurs at that location. So that's kind of where I'm coming from right now.
Great. Mr. Story?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm familiar with the building at 4551 San Fernando years ago. This is many, many moons ago, and this is why I had a little huddle with the city attorney. I had brokered that building. This is like 10, 12 years ago. And so I was asking her if I'll be in conflict or should I recuse myself for that purpose. The answer was no, so therefore here it is. I'm sharing my 2 cents worth. This building has got a very difficult ramp to navigate, to go up, and then whenever you pull into a parking space, especially if you're driving an SUV or any other car, when you're backing, the space between the 2 parkings across from each other is so little that you're going to have some major issues. I can only think for a moment what happens if you got 2 cars queuing up from the top and a couple of 2 or 3 cars queuing up from the first level, and you don't have much queuing space between the street and the ramp, by the way. It's a funky building. It serves its purpose for artists, folks that don't have intense use of the parking. That's the first problem that I have. That I think it's going to generate issues, especially when you have that many cars going back up and down, if that's going to be used. I have no problems with the church occupying the space in that location at 4551, but I am very, very concerned about the egress and egress of the cars. And for that reason, I have an issue with that. Secondly, parking has always been atrocious at that building. It will continue being a challenge. When the gentleman got up and said that, look, we already have problems here, I mean, it's deja vu. I remembered what I was hearing when I was visiting a client in that building 12 years ago. Now, if the use of this church was only limited to a certain day, I mean, when they told me that it's an hour and a half of service for Sunday, I mean, I said, well, Sundays, you're not going to be able to interfere with businesses and their business times and so forth. It seems to be reasonable, an hour and a half or 2 hours a week. I'm not so sure how you are going to enforce that or how you are going to monitor that. For that reason, I'm having some serious doubts about allowing this church occupying that location. We would love to have you in Glendale, in my opinion, and the word that you are preaching is welcomed. However, it may be that a better location awaits you. I, in my opinion, do not believe that this location will serve the church, the church's parishioners and the businesses that are there together. For one reason or other, they just don't mesh well together. So those are my positions.
Great. Andrew?
I have several thoughts. I won't give you all of them, but I think when I look at the findings, I have a problem with one finding, and I'll just limit it to that because I think the issue for me is if you're paying for the parking and you're assuming you're having it 24 hours a day, then the landlord should ask if you want to lease it to the church during certain hours. But I don't think I can impose that, and I think to me that is indeed, double dipping. But on C, where the came up with this finding: the project involves exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or the intended use of development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the area. And I read this, and I don't find this an exceptional circumstance. This is a self-imposed circumstance. If you choose to move here and you don't meet the existing conditions and you're going to change it and you're going to change the use to an auditorium, and then you have only 2 parking places, and you assume that because you're bringing it in here that's an exceptional circumstance, I find that to be not very accurate. So to me, I don't think the findings are made. I would not support the determination that this is a valid exception. 29 spaces. I mean, we're going to be talking about parking exceptions in every one of ours today. I think we need to have better findings, and this finding does not stand with one leg in the water. It just falls over. So, in my opinion, after hearing this and looking at this, I don't think the finding can be made, and I would not support the determination that was put before us as an exception for parking.
Great, thanks. Well, it's always interesting when we get these cases, the parking exception. The staff, I think, is a little bit more conservative than what we allow, or the Planning Commission allows. But in this case, I think the staff did make an exception, and we didn't have as strict of standards that we usually apply to the other cases. Having said that, though, the building is interesting. How it's all the tenants, and it seems like there's miscommunication definitely between them and also the business owner. And it's interesting how each tenant, I view it as each tenant has their own assigned parking, and the operation of another tenant should not impede their own operation or their use of the parking. So I was trying to find the middle ground of trying to make this work. And the only way I could see it is having such a large congregation or large people in one area. I would have proposed to have the congregation meet only in that hour that they're going to be meeting for that week. And I would be okay moving forward if there was a limitation like that in place for the 10:30 to 11:30 or 10 to 11:30 a.m. on Sundays for the congregation, and for the rest of the week for it to be limited to the 2 parking spaces that they have. I would be open to doing that if the other commissioners are open to that as well, but we may not have that support, and we don't have the strict standards that we've applied to this, like we have to the other cases, and I think that's where it really falls short in this case. Okay. Well, do we have a motion or any other comments?
Well,
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. Did the appellant receive Mr. Slovis's letter to us
Today?
today?
Yes, I gave them a copy.
I think the thing that concerns me is, of course, is that he's not here, and some of the statements in here further indicate to me that the discussion between the landlord and the tenants is a part of the big problem here. That being said, I understand that's a civil issue, but it's affecting a determination that was based upon what Mr. Slovis told the planning department and what the reality seems to be. If I was going to rent a large area and I only had use of it 2 hours a week, I think I wouldn't want to rent it. I mean, to me, that's a terrible investment. I mean, some people have terrible investments, but that would be not one that I would think most people would indulge in. And so it didn't doesn't seem a reasonable option to me to ask somebody to only limit their activities to 2 days, 2 hours out of it, or 3 hours out of a day. So I would just, because it's unreasonable, I would not even consider, I would not support that. But I do, I think the church, it's certainly operating in good faith, and I think the tenants are responding in good faith and concern, and I don't see that the proposal addresses both of those, and I can't support it as it is presented.
Great. Do we have a motion?
Sure. I move that upon review and consideration of all material and exhibits of current record relative to the parking exception permit, case number PPEX 1231816, located at 451 San Fernando Road, and after having conducted an appeal hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby reverses the Community Development Director's decision and denies said parking exception permit, case number PPEX 1231816, in accord with the revised findings and conditions.
Second.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If the commission is inclined to reverse this, which obviously seems to be the case, I think the better motion might be just to return in 2 weeks with findings for the denial.
Return where?
Just return to this agenda.
Yeah.
We'll just continue this matter for 2 weeks, because you have to have findings for denial, and we're not.
Well, we found that the presentation of the findings were not substantiated.
I know, but I think we need to write that up.
Okay, so you would like to bring it back
I'm
to
not
us?
contesting your decision. I just, if we can return with prepared findings.
Okay.
Based on the arguments that I heard were the uncertainty of the arrangements, that the building has a difficult ramp and lack of backup space, and that this was not exceptional circumstances.
Well, can't those be the findings?
They have to work it out.
And also,
I think you have to vote on the exact language.
I would like it to clearly state that finding C is unsubstantiated in the.
Yeah, finding, yes. Is that
Okay, so 2 weeks?
your next meeting?
We don't have any more meetings.
We may not have a meeting in 2 weeks, so at this point, we don't have anything on the agenda, so I would continue this to your next meeting.
Okay.
Since the hearing's closed.
Do we need a new motion for that?
You made the motion.
I
Do
made-
you want to amend
So,
it?
Yeah, so-
Findings to come back.
So I will amend my motion that we deliver this to the Planning Department to develop the findings and bring them back to the Commission at the next meeting.
For final approval.
You need to see and vote on the exact language.
Yes.
Exactly.
Correct. Understood. So that's my motion.
Great.
And I will second that motion, and with a friendly suggestion that after this, that you explain to the appellant what that means. Thank you.
Great. Can we have roll call?
Reluctantly, yes.
Landrigan,
Yes.
Sheets,
Aye.
Chairperson Yesayan.
Aye. Thank you. All right, can we have next item, please? This is parking reduction permit number PPRP 1211310. This is location 515 South Glendale Avenue, and we have a staff report.
Actually, I'll be brief since you've already received the information in your packet. At the last meeting that took place back in March, the applicant at the time had submitted a parking study, which at that time staff did not have enough time to review since we didn't receive it, within reasonable time. And so since then, the applicant has submitted a revised copy of the draft, or excuse me, it's in, at least my copy says draft across it, but this is their final study that they submitted to us. And it indicates information regarding conclusion of what their parking study has determined to be, in concluding as it relates to the existing operation, the future operation, and how they believe, again, meaning the parking study, how the traffic engineer has determined that how this use and their expansion will function with the existing conditions or existing number of parking spaces that they are proposing, in this case, to add. They're going to have 9 spaces total.
Great.
Mr. Chair,
You have a comment?
we have 4 planning commissioners, and the last time we had 4 planning commissioners, we had a tie, and that was continued because I know the applicants wanted to have all of us here, and we knew that Mr. Chang is in Korea. I'm just asking, rather than go through this, and I wish I had asked this earlier, if they wanted to continue it or if they want us to vote on it.
Who? Asking who?
The applicant, because, you know, the same issue might come up, and
Well,
I'm just asking you.
yeah. Well, I think we didn't have Mr. Sheets last time. We had
Correct.
Mr. Lee.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard, and it's never guaranteed
I
who's
know,
going to be
I
here.
know.
Well, part of the confusion, in addition, when I reviewed the hearing, because I wasn't here, I reviewed the data that we had.
Right.
Now we have new data that Mr. Lee hasn't reviewed.
It's really a pickle.
If he's reviewed it, he's not here, so it's the same as not reviewing it. So I don't know what that means, but I think it adds to the point that Commissioner Landrigan's making. I'm sure it's up to the applicant, but it's
Well, it's
food
up-
for thought.
it's up
food
to
for
us,
thought. Well, it
yeah.
is, but it's food
Yeah.
for thought. We just want to be fair, as we've tried to be all the way along, and have all the data. So,
Well, go ahead, Mr. Story.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't have a card for the applicant. Do we? Have you submitted one?
Marco.
Did it get buried?
Marco,
Oh, it's down here.
there are.
Um,
Hid them.
I have 3 cards for the applicant. Mr. Historian?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question for staff. If there is some logic behind what I just heard. If this was postponed, when would be the next time it will come in front of the Planning Commission?
It would be heard the next time you continue it, too. So our next meeting is June 5th. So if you were to continue it, you could continue it to June 5th, or you could continue it to June 19th. At this point, I believe we have full commissions at both meetings. However, we do not know what is going to happen with appointments, and there's a lot of things that are beyond our control.
And do you have a...
That's that too.
That's
Right.
an issue.
But I really feel for the applicant here. They really need a full committee.
Yeah.
And the last time I asked the question about that, but I think it's only fair that they have 5, that we don't have a stalemate again.
Is it appropriate to ask the appellant's representative to weigh in on this, or is that...
Applicant?
The applicant, I'm sorry, not the appellant. I mean, I know
Well,
he represents them, and he has a history of being
It's
a good...
chair's discretion.
Well, we could, it's assuming we might have a split again,
Well-
right?
No.
I would rather, here's why I'm
Yeah.
suggesting this, rather than have us deliberate us and then they already know how the vote is, that we wait till the new information is among all 5 of us, and so it's a fair hearing for all 5 of us instead of the 4 of us. I mean, I am
guess the
trying
way
to
we
be...
could also open it up and hear them, and then we can continue it afterwards.
I agree with
Since-
Mr. Sheets. Let's hear what they have to say.
Since they're here already.
I would like to hear Mr.
Okay, so since we have 2 applicants and you have 15 minutes
Thank you.
between the 2 of you.
That's
Thank you. My name is Marco Brembilla. For the record, the address is 109 East Harvard. and as a person who sat in that very chair for about 10 years, I know very well that, you may, it's ideal to have 5 people, I have nothing against that, but as you very well know, last-minute things happen, and then, again, a person is not able to attend the meeting, and our client finally needs to make a decision either to close shop, to move on, or to move on with their life. So from our perspective, we are happy that the majority of the board this year, we have no objection for you. Actually, we would prefer that you continue this and to hear the case and make a decision, hopefully favorable. But as far as we are concerned, we would rather have a decision today.
Okay.
Thank you. And if I may,
So you have 15 minutes.
Yes, I know, I understand. As it was stated earlier on, the hearing was continued because there was a tie in the vote, but also because very specifically we had a traffic study done, and the traffic study mentioned the impact of the change of use very marginally. And one of the points that we're very much concerned here was, you are giving us the current situation, but why don't you give us exactly what will be the picture of what will happen down the road? Just to recap, what it was. It was, a small business trying to stay in the market, is proposing to eliminate 2 residential units and use that space for a change of use. Again, remember, it was not for an additional sales space or an additional production space. It was, as a matter of fact, for refrigeration and storage. Now, in order to do that, we asked the traffic engineers to look into the impact of that. What the traffic engineer did on a Friday and on a Saturday from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., for every 15 minutes, they surveyed the 5 spaces on Glendale Avenue and the 7 existing spaces on the premises. There's plenty of parking on the adjacent, side street, but they concentrated on those 5 spaces on Glendale Avenue and the 7 spaces within the property. Their final decision or final findings was the following, that out of the 5 parking spaces on Glendale Avenue, an average of 3 were always available. There's a turnaround. And of the 7 on the premises, 4 were actually available, again, as a continued basis. Now, with our new proposal, we are adding 2 more spaces. Potentially, if you were to allow us, we could add a tandem space, thus adding 3 spaces. As one of the commissioners was particularly concerned about the lack of parking for the residential, one of the alternatives would be that one of these spaces, and additionally created, be dedicated to the residential unit, and 1 or 2 potential additional spaces for the commercial could be either for the employees or, the increase on the traffic as required. There were a few things to be added to that. One of them was the traffic study is actually suggesting that the 5 parking spaces on Glendale Avenue be limited to a 30-minute parking, which the city engineer can do quite easily. This will, again, stimulate the further turnaround and not parking on a longer basis. In addition to that, the traffic study also concentrated on a number of bakeries in the area that have 0 parking. And this is very typical in Glendale, including some of the major name ones that have 0 parking. And there is one right down the road which has a very similar operation with 0 parking, and that's exactly what is happening. So this small business is struggling in the same vein. Now, we did one more thing. We had an internal survey of the clientele coming to the bakery. This was done on a weekday, just to have a feel about that. And the average number of people coming to the bakery is on or about 175, 180 people. Of these, 70% are coming by car, and their turnaround is about 3.3 car per hour. The traffic study is actually calculating 4, which means like 4 cars are parked per hour, so the turnaround. The reality actually is slightly better, so it's substantiating the fact or the findings of the traffic study. 25% are actually walking clients, and 5% are coming by public means. Now, in addition to that, there was a question about the employees, which we have it in writing now, that there are 4 employees living on Maple, Elk, Windsor, Jackson within the immediate vicinity, and the 2 other employees are carpooling together. So this gives an overall picture of the situation. I think the traffic engineer has done a detailed work of, like, what is the before and after situation. And you have the traffic study in front of you. There is a page with bullet forms, just like, the 3 or 4 major points that you may want to consider. And having done so, probably I'm within my 15 minutes, and I can stop. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I have a couple of.
You do have Garo Nazarian. Does he want to say anything?
Just in case there is a need,
Okay.
as a
Mr. Story?
How many employees? Is it 4 or 6?
6. 6 employees, of which 4 are they live in the immediate vicinity.
How many of the 6 employees work at the counter or at?
Typically 2. Typically 2.
So
because some of them are coming and going. Some of them are coming and baking, and then they may coming on a later shift.
And so there are 4 that do the kitchen, the baking.
Yeah, yeah.
What time do they start in the morning?
I do not know. It's about 8:30? 6. Oh, for baking operation. For the
Baking.
sales? 6. Okay.
And that baking operation goes from 6 to what time?
Typically until 11 o'clock in the morning, because they need to be ready for that. Remember, their type of operation, if this is of interest to you, is they do not have breads, they do not have special packing, because most of their orders are prepackaged in the refrigerator. So a lot of the customer, they come pick it up, go to the cashier, pay and go. They not necessarily interact with the sales staff. The sales staff, they only have baked goods, and if they have pieces, of course, those are the 2 people who are actually serving them. Other than that, if you have visited the premises, they have the goods in the refrigerator. They are already packed. Even the smaller items, they are prepackaged, so the self-service staff pick up, go to the cashier, and basically you're out. The typical turnaround of the minutes is about 8 to 12 minutes. The traffic study calculated everything based on a maximum of 15 minutes, what they serve it. So they have been actually more conservative.
I'm going to go back just to the issue of continuing it or not continuing it. The last meeting, which this case was going to be brought before us, I just remember that the reason that the staff told us that the applicant wants this to be continued is because we didn't have a full commission. Is that true?
No. We didn't ask for the continuation. What you asked, your vote was actually split. And
no, I'm sorry. There's a meeting earlier this month.
May 1st.
Okay.
The May 1st meeting.
Correct.
That we were
okay,
supposed
yes,
to hear
that's
this.
just correct. That's just correct.
And we had set that date for that day because and Mr. Lee had said he'll be there for
Correct.
that date. And the reason we were told that the applicant wants to continue is because there wasn't the full commission there.
No, this was the reason for the postponement. We requested the 2-week extension from the May 1st to May 15. The reason for that was we submitted the revised traffic report, the additional traffic study on April 15 as an informal package to staff for them to review and give feedback to us in case they wanted for the traffic engineer to do further work. As some of the staff were not available, they were out of the city or on vacation, that could not take place. So we went back to the traffic engineer and had them finalize the draft portion as a final report, and that report was submitted on, I think, May 1st, if I'm not wrong. So that was the reason we requested the delay of the 2 weeks to be able to submit the traffic study, because the staff otherwise would not have time to physically review that. So it was not because of the full board or not, because we don't control that, of course.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard.
Yeah.
Is that wrong? The staff?
I made that request.
Okay.
No, I think there's a confusion. The reason why the previous case that you heard at 1113 South End, that was the applicant's representative who made the request to continue their case to have a full commission.
Okay, got it.
Mr. Brambilla submitted a letter to staff that they needed more time for the traffic engineer to finalize that report, not because staff was not here, it was just because that was just the answer that was given to staff.
Because
that-
physically,
that
we
needed
didn't
more
have any
time.
input from you. That's correct.
We advised Mr. Nazarian that there was an exhibit missing from the draft report that they submitted to us to review. And then Mr. Brambilla came
correct.
to the counter and said, by the way, I'd like to request a continuation. And then I advised him, oh, by the way, did Mr. Nazarian communicate to you that we were missing the one exhibit? And
Okay.
That's correct.
No, I just wanted to make sure we're not continuing because based on what commissioner is here or not.
no, that
so-
was again the previous.
Okay, then that's fine. And I would be okay to move forward with this, and if there's a split, we'll continue it. If not, we'll vote on how it is. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Okay.
Started already.
Yeah. All right. Any?
Since it's continued, are we supposed to only discuss new information? I'm just asking the question.
Well, I think we can ask questions about anything, but
Well, can we ask the,
Well, you close the hearing, but you certainly can ask about the new information that was submitted.
anything, and old information,
We
since
can
it was
close the hearing, okay.
continued?
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So, I'm sorry, what was that?
What's the answer? We can discuss.
we can discuss.
The hearing was not closed. The hearing's open, so it's still open for discussion on all topics.
Okay, thank you.
We have any questions for the applicant?
I have a question from Mr. Lida. So you were privy to this report, the traffic engineer report, the traffic consultant.
Yes, they submitted that last week.
And so what are your thoughts on this? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I need to know what staff thinks about it.
Well, staff reviewed it, as a matter of fact, with the planning hearing officer who originally heard the case, and we determined that, based on their conclusion, it seemed okay. I mean, there wasn't really much for us to not agree with. I mean, this is prepared, a document prepared by a traffic engineer, and they've done their work, and they've given facts regarding the existing, the future, and the off-site parking situation. Billy, unless you want to add more?
In reviewing, actually, is the microphone on? In reviewing the presented traffic study, I mean, there came to light a few points. One being is that they noted the on-street parking in the area. Obviously, on-street parking is not guaranteed. There was also a suggestion made that the on-street parking adjacent to the project site, the 5 spaces, be marked for 30 minutes only. And again, this is something that is outside the control of the planning department. That is something that is done through the Traffic and Transportation Department of the Public Works. They also alluded to the fact that the number of employees is not going to change. Again, as stated in the original decision letter, there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee that the individuals that are currently working there now that are walking to work will be the same ones that are employed indefinitely, or that the number of employees is not going to change with the expansion of the existing business with 4,000 additional feet. Granted, yes, we understand that some of it is going to be office space and some of it is going to actually be devoted to cold storage or refrigeration. But again, we understood the analysis that was prepared by the traffic engineer. It's ultimately up to the Planning Commission at this point to determine whether or not there is going to be negative traffic impacts due to the expansion of this business and the requested parking exception.
What is the issue with the use changes and what we approve? I believe it doesn't go with a change of use.
Correct. The parking exception goes with the business itself. This again would be the bakery business. Currently, They are stating that 4 of the 6 employees work on site. There's not going to be any additional employees based on the expansion of the business, et cetera, et cetera. These are criteria ultimately that cannot be controlled within the scope of the parking exception. They are also requesting an expansion of the business, a significant square footage expansion, that is. And so ultimately, when that's approved, the Planning Commission has no authority to require the applicant or the property owner to remove any portion once it has been approved and constructed.
But if the use does change, they would have to come before us again?
If the use changes, yes, it would have to come back to the Planning Commission, or in this case, not the
To
Planning
ask for
Commission,
the
but
same parking,
the Planning
or
Hearing Officer.
depending on what the use is.
Depending on what the use is, it would go back to the Planning Hearing Officer to determine whether or not that proposed new business would have a negative impact, or whether a parking exception would be
If the same parking
Granted.
exception could apply to this.
It would not be the same parking exception. They would be requesting a new parking
parking
exception based on their operation and use.
And Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that last time there was quite a bit of discussion, thanks to Ms. Landrigan, about this thing, that the analysis, the way that they're looking at it, is not just the bakery, they're looking at the entire site, including the flower shop. So in other words, if flower shop use was going to be changed, a business that is going to occupy the flower shop that is going to require more than what the flower shop needs at this time, they have to come back. In other words, they have to
the whole parking.
absolutely. I mean, that's what really tipped the scale in favor of this project for me, because they're not only looking at one business, they're looking at the amalgamation. Too big of a word. The holistically, the entire site, and that to me is appealing. By the way, I need to hear a little bit more about the 2 additional parkings, and something was thrown out as a tandem. And
There's no drawing.
where did those 2 additional parkings come from? We were under the impression that there were 7 on site, right?
Correct. 7 on site existing, and because the way we were redesigning it, we were having like a total of 9 parking spaces. In the new parking study that you have, there is an option that one of the parking spaces can be used as a tandem space, which could be 2 spaces, for example, designated to employees, which means they know who they are, that they are there in the morning, and that's basically guaranteeing that.
That's number 9 and 10, right?
Yes, correct. And the one that you see as a dotted sort of parking space in front of the other one is potentially a tandem space. That could be, I mean, again, at your discretion, one more parking space assigned to that property.
And what is there a loading? Is there parking that you have?
Loading is
as a very
not
short
required,
term?
and if you recall when we had this discussion, there is no loading because every delivery is being done by a contract delivery
What
system.
I mean is when people come in just 4 or 5 minutes to pick up a cake and then get out. Is there parking designated for that, or do they just load up on the side?
Well, no. These are the 9 parking spaces. If you were to decide, for example, to allocate 1 for the residential unit, that would be really blocked for the residential unit. Could be in a variety of manners. Could be dedicated to the residential. The 8 remaining parking spaces can be either designated employee or open parking. So those are the 8 parking spaces or potentially 9 parking spaces that people are using, typically for their purchases. And that is the traffic study basically saying if you were to have 7 and your turnaround is so fast that there is always a parking space available. Remember, they did the parking study on a Friday and a Saturday for 13 consecutive hours every 15 minutes. So it's like, it goes a long way showing, the actual use. So what they are basically saying, the impact of the addition or the change of use is actually immaterial because, the amount of parking you have already, I mean, that is below the requirement by the book, if you so will, but it will still be satisfying. So that's basically their argument in essence.
Do we have other questions?
I do have. Go ahead.
Just a quick one.
Sure.
The ownership of this whole property is
1. The flower shop is owned. The entire property is owned by one
It's
person.
a flower shop and a bakery, and
Correct.
then the residential.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Correct. And there's all one property.
Landrigan?
And all your landscaping for all the parking is in here?
The landscaping, I do not know, yes. I mean, we do have a plan on that. I'm sure we
I'm
haven't
just looking at
designed
it when you
Yeah.
keep adding more.
No, we haven't designed it because we don't have the approval yet.
Actually, looking on the package that you have, this proposed site plan, we are showing the landscaping that we are going to comply with the TAPE code. That 5% of the parking lot landscaping is not existing. It will be in the improvement of the site.
Great.
We are proposing new landscaping.
I see it proposed there, and that's just the all right.
We are not asking for a variance, we are providing.
Yeah, we are providing. You have two site plans. One is the existing,
Yes.
and this is the proposed. And by comparing these two site plans, you will see the difference. Existing has no landscaping with the 7 parking spaces, and we are proposing 9 parking spaces with the required landscape area.
I'm just amazed how you saw that with this print. I mean, I'm
She knows what the etchings mean, the marks mean.
She's a landscaping architect. Do we have any other questions before we close the public hearing? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and enter deliberation. Anyone want to go first?
Go ahead.
I guess true to the form, last time I went first on this one, and so would I this time. Look, we have a traffic engineering report, a consultant report in front of us. Staff, at least, does not have much issue with it, is what they're telling me. And the applicant has gone out and added another 2 spaces, therefore reducing the perceived impact. I don't think there is anything wrong with going forward with an approval for this project. The employees, most bakeries start very early in the morning, so this employee parking issue may not really be an issue. And by the same token, I agree with Mrs. Zamatakis that you cannot guarantee how many employees they can have or not have. By the same token, you can't for sure say that they're not going to only have 2 employees, or 4 employees, or 6 employees. The fact of the matter remains that not much has changed from when I made my decision on this thing. This is a very dense area. It has a very high walk score, and I keep bringing that concept back up again, that it's not a novel concept. This thing is coming, and we are encouraging folks to walk, shop, dine, whatever it is, in the neighborhood. And this would be a perfect example of it. And I truly don't believe that parking is going to be an issue for this use, especially when you have early mornings. I mean, I don't know who uses street parking between 6 and 8 in the morning in the area. Maybe they can't park between 6 and 8 because they have street cleaning. Perhaps that's what it is. But I'm okay with what they have done and the amount of the effort that they've demonstrated in wanting to work with us and bringing all kinds of reports and substantiation about it.
Okay. Sheets?
No, I'm listening to you. You're new.
I'm new. Well, I appreciate the effort. I have a lot more information now than I did when I listened to the original hearing, and I see all the things that we just discussed with the other commissioners about the efforts you're putting forth, what you're trying to do. I'll tell you where I hang up. The street parking is the area that concerns me, not just at your site. So I look at it beyond that, and the reason we're here is because parking is an issue everywhere. So I see that as an issue, stumbling point for me, and I see the employee issue. I know where you are today. I don't know if you'll be there tomorrow. So based on my previous review and the notes that I have from then and tonight, I'm still not swayed. that that I would approve this. That's where I am right now.
Landrigan?
Well, I do appreciate some of the changes. I think certainly in the right direction. I can't ever really substantiate using on-street parking in lieu of an already diminished and exacerbated parking situation. And I see this being a bakery that is probably going to have increased activity. I certainly would hope so, but I don't see it being able to handle that. And so I see making this exception not to the good of the business, because I think that what will happen is it'll be like Trader Joe's are all over the world, where you finally just are so frustrated you go to Ralph's, which is the only reason I go to Ralph's. It's frustrated at Trader Joe's. But I think that the issue for me is that it is already an impacted area. I believe that our traffic plan does encourage coming on transit, but darn, I'm not carrying a cake on a bus, because I doubt if I'd get off with the cake. It would probably be eaten by everybody on that bus. But in reality, it is very difficult to do pastry shopping except for a few things and some of the beautiful cakes that are at the bakery here. I have a hard time with all these parking changes and reductions, and I don't see how the report actually justified the already exacerbated area. I can't see that finding being made. So I would have to still stay with the planning department's determination, which is to deny the parking exception.
Okay. Well, I said this at the last meeting, and I'll say it again. I always find it difficult to apply the same standards for parking citywide as we do in certain areas in the downtown Glendale, greater downtown Glendale area. And I definitely see this as being part of that. I'm happy we're actually going to be talking about that, setting up a committee later in this meeting to look into those kinds of issues, and so we won't have them anymore. This area, I have always seen it as a very walkable area. I live very close to it. I walk to it. It's a place where you can park your car somewhere else, or you go to one business and you walk over to another business. That's one thing. Second, the addition of 500 square feet. It's not for new retail shop. It's an addition to add these new specialty cakes. It's in addition to add cake space, a storage space basically. And the rest of the new space that they're going to use is tenant space that's already in use. They're going to change that to be part of their business as office space, which currently is part of a mix of a lot of space, a lot of use in a very small, tight space in the bakery. So I see that as enhancing the business, not in the way of bringing more people walking or driving there, but in the business being able to sell these larger cakes and operating and being able to deliver cakes. The other thing that was interesting to me was that a lot of their new business is for these really big cakes, which will require these storage, but that they'll also be delivering these cakes using a delivery company that won't be using their own spaces, but it'll be delivery trucks that are outside of the premise, and they'll be calling up the delivery trucks whenever they need it. I think those items are unique. Not a lot of businesses have such a situation like that, and I think, considering those items and considering where this business is located, I would justify it as I would justify the parking exception for those reasons. And additionally, I see this Glendale Avenue section becoming more of a pastry, a dense pastry environment of a lot of pastry shops, and I would definitely want to preserve that, and I hope that's part of the South Glendale Community Plan, as I've stated before. So those are my comments. I think we are at a split again.
Well, let me just throw in another 2 cents worth here.
Sure.
Mr. Foy, is there anything in our ordinance that says that off-site parking cannot be used in a traffic engineer's analysis? Anything in the code?
Off-site, well, I mean, on-street parking?
On-street parking.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, the commission has to make a finding that the commission can look at the operation and it doesn't say that you can't use it as part of your consideration. No, it doesn't say that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, considering if there hasn't been any, yeah.
I mean, I applaud your exuberance. Go ahead, and I'll follow you later.
Go ahead.
And then this thought, and I respect it, that we are exasperating a situation that already is exasperated. You know, those the street parking is there for the public to use. It's not there to always be vacant or showcased as parking space. Ooh, we have a space now. You have an engineer that is telling you that there is plenty of room for this business to thrive, especially when they're not adding to their retail, they're adding to their kitchen side. And you and I, Stephanie, had discussion about how I carry my cake and how you do yours. I mean, there is
Inside of me.
Right. There is compelling reason, preponderance of evidence, so to say, that you cannot, we shouldn't just say, you know, it's easier because it's the code, and that's what it is. We have a discretionary authority here. And I am saying, if we are moving towards that dense, urban center city that we are all looking forward to, and there is no other way about it, we better embrace it. You're not going to have every bakery with 21 parking spaces. There is no one bakery in City of Glendale that has got 21 parking spaces. There is not. Now, watch tomorrow. Somebody is going to write something that, yeah, this bakery has 20.
Well, including Portos.
Wait, Portos has got city parking space in the back. It's not.
But they basically share parking. People
that's what it is.
Park somewhere else and they walk over.
So those are my thoughts. And we are deliberating. I certainly would not find it, God forbid, within me to want to change anybody else's mind here, but, you know, those are my thoughts.
Well, we have a change of heart.
Well, my thought about I think it's interesting that you bring up the on-street parking because there is street cleaning that occurs, so it's not always available. If it's paid, it's a different issue. If it's free, then it's usually filled in by people who will not, are probably, it's a parking convenience then. It's not regulated because it's not on private property. It is public, and that's the issue that I have in throwing it into the mix. It's like water. You have to deal with water that you create on your own site. You know this, you're a realtor. And when you incur activity, you should deal with it on your own site. And I think it's been bettered by the 10. I really like that. But then what does that make it? 12? A reduction of 12 if you have the 10? Is that?
No, 10 or 11, something like that. Because they're a short 14 from what. And now if they're coming up with additional 2, potentially 3, then they're short 11.
And here's the thing, you know, our purpose here is to do what is best for the city, and not necessarily is that going to be what is bad for a great tenant or a great baker. But sometimes the two of them don't necessarily jive. This might be the wrong place. They might find a better place where they have more parking and they have as many people as Porto's does, and I would hope so. But my concern is that it's in a neighborhood that's dense. There's already insufficient parking there. And to me, it's just exasperating the situation. If it was 2, I might have no problem. I mean, seriously, but I think 14, that's quite a bit.
11.
Well, I think one of the, it's the tenants, the existing residential that are being converted, and that's what's really adding.
That's what I'm concerned about.
That's
we
what's really
changed
adding
that
it.
and this.
Yeah. Well, I would not want them to leave, for an issue like this. Mr. Sheets?
Since this door has been opened, I will, my mind hasn't been changed, but I will share with you some thoughts I've had relative to this deliberation and many others. You just have to listen. I grew up here in this city, came here in 1952 as 6 years old, so I have seen the changes and the evolutions. Now, whether that is supported today or whether that meets the visions of where we want to go and what happens in other communities like Santa Monica and Santa Barbara and other places, I don't know. But I can tell you from my perspective, I not only live here, I went to school here, my kids grew up here, I've seen the evolution. When I go downtown, it's not easy for me to park. I may not go to this particular place, but I go to other places. So I'm not focusing on this spot, but I am focusing on the issue that will impact beyond this business. And we are not even considering the residents that park on the other streets that can't find parking, that will have to go there or send their guests there. So it's not a knock, it's reality. And I'll finish it off by saying the mobility issues that are being clearly stated at the dais are good. I also sat through the parking consultant telling us that we have to go away from limiting parking. We need to become a community that we take the essentially, my words, take the parking away and people will adapt. I'm not adapting. I'm not going to adapt. I'm not going to take the bus, the train, or my bicycle to go buy a cake at this place. And there are many people like me in this community. And what it causes is them to go elsewhere. And I hear that from people that realize that I am on the commission. So I like to listen to the future, and I like to consider the vision, and I've met a lot of people that are visionaries within the city and the council and the commissions. But my view is impacted by those thoughts. So as I said in the previous hearing and this one, I have to consider the weight of the information that's been given. I've been swayed by it to a degree, and that's the beauty of the process we go through here. So therein lies my history as far as why I think this way. So it's more of an overall view, a holistic view, and I think there is a constituency that maybe isn't as well represented in our thinking of the future sometimes, and that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, for one thing, Mr. Sheets, I don't want a future that does not include you. That's for certain. That I can tell you. And deliberations and conversations like this, when you elevate the debate level, you can only become better for it.
That's how we change it.
Okay? But so long as we all have an open mind, and that's what makes this thing very sweet and very personable, and the efficacies of it will show as we go forward. Correct. It's something as simple as that. With that, Mr. Chair, I don't mind for us to take a vote.
So, well, we have a split here, and we could continue it for another commission to have a better, more full commission, or maybe a new commission that will think differently and might be able to do a majority vote. I would propose we continue it, since we won't get very far by doing a split.
I guess we could ask what would be the recommendation of
Now we're
our
asking again.
legal?
Well, the zoning code, Planning Commission Chairperson, you signed, the zoning code, the rules as well as the zoning code say that you need an affirmative vote of 3 members of the commission at a minimum to reverse, affirm, or modify any decision. That's in the Planning Commission rules as well as the zoning. So the recommendation would be to basically anything you want to do, but usually, typically, I've been told we've continued the hearings to the next available date.
Good idea.
Continue it?
Yes.
Okay, well, can I get a motion?
I move that we continue.
I'm sorry, before you finish it up, would this be, if it's continued, the commissioners at the next meeting would have to watch the video before.
And this one.
And the public hearing will not be open.
It's like Game of Thrones.
Right. Episode 3. Okay, go ahead.
Which isn't as good. I move that we continue the hearing for parking reduction permit case number PPRP 1211310 until the
June
first
5th.
meeting in June.
June 5th, without
June
further
5th.
notice?
Without further notice.
Second.
Great. Can we have a roll call?
Commissioners Astorian?
Yes, ma'am.
Landrigan?
Yes.
Sheets? Yes, I am.
Aye. Great. Can we have our next item, which is comments? No, I'm sorry. Number 8, Planning Department updates. Mr. Foy?
Yes, I excuse me, I'm trying to sit through my agenda here. Yes, as you know, the City Council has initiated amendments to the zoning code where that we should examine ways to streamline the planning entitlement processes. And to that end, they have directed staff to put together a task force composed of various perspectives in the community that could formulate some recommendations which would perhaps result in suggested changes to the zoning code. And if that does, we'll come back to this full commission and then go to council. But as part of that task force, we would request that the commission appoint 2 of its members to serve on that task force.
Great. Does anyone have any strong feelings about being part of this task force?
You do.
We'll want to see what other commissioners.
Oh, you know, I love commission
Oh, yeah.
meetings. We have the best time. However, I'm happy to defer to someone else who.
Commissioners to attend.
Participate.
Not at all.
Well, we
It
would
does?
have, we could not have 3 commissioners there, I think.
It's all right.
That's right.
Right? That's why it's limited to 2.
This is not the city attorney is advising us that we not have a quorum of the planning commission on this task force.
So 2 or less.
But the task force is open to the public, right?
Well, should we have
Yeah.
more than one then? Because that would allow one or the other of us to come.
One or the other?
Well, if
Quorum
Support
is 3.
if one can't be
I
there.
know, but if one is there and then one of us were interested in a section of it, we could come to that meeting in another, and we could make sure we're not.
Any member of the public who is not on the task force can listen. They can't participate.
So as long as you're not participating.
Right.
Right.
That's what they're
Yeah.
looking for. Sorry about that. They are asking for two commissioners that can't participate,
Right.
actually.
Well, we can have two commissioners that can participate, and then if there's another commissioner who would like to go and view what's happening, they can do that, but they can't participate, right?
Can I ask what the commitment is? I mean, I think that might help us.
What we're anticipating is having meetings on Monday evenings, probably every other Monday, starting early to mid-June. We're shooting for June 10th. I'm not sure we'll make that. And we anticipate probably about 5 meetings.
Is it Mondays again? Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Monday nights. And this group is made up of business interests and different community members.
Should be there.
Is that right?
All stakeholders.
And how large do you expect it to be?
I think we're inviting a little over 20 people, which means if they all accept, they're not all going to show up at all times. So probably the average meeting would be 15 people maybe.
But Mr. Foy, we had a great show at the Downtown Specific Plan, the committee that attended all the Downtown Specific Plan meetings. I mean, religiously, folks would attend it, and a lot of people attended it. So I don't know if, I think you should expect a whole lot more than 20 people.
I mean,
Well, you're
the best
suggesting that
shot,
all the
yeah.
people who we've invited
They'll invite
will
us.
show up every week, and that would be terrific if that happened.
Right.
At any rate, I'll be happy to. I'll be happy. I mean, I'll put my.
And I'm going to take my name out because I teach on Mondays.
I've been on them before. I think we truly need to have a member or more than one there, because we not only give input, but we gain a lot of understanding about where people's minds are around these issues. And then, having been part of the process, we bring it back here as additional information for our team. So I would defer. I know Eric would like to be part of that process, and I would defer. I'll volunteer if nobody does it, but right now I've been there, I've done that, and I think Eric would be a good member, and we haven't talked to Commissioner Lee yet either.
And
So.
I think, Mr.
That's what I was
Storian,
gonna say.
you would be a great member also.
Well, look, you know, I'm fine one way or other, because there are organizations that are out there that are asking me to be there, and perhaps not as a commissioner, so I would be voicing,
Right.
you know, my concerns and so forth. But having said that, I think it may be a good idea if we have.
See if Commissioner Lee. And
Commissioner
we're not in a
Lee
big
here,
rush.
and then let's, you know.
And
Yeah, I think
it might
give us time to
also
think
be
about
better
it.
to wait till the next meeting,
Is that
because
okay?
the commission
Well,
might change as well.
We will have a participant, we just can't name who it is yet.
Okay.
2 participants.
Yeah, the next Planning Commission meeting will be just a few days, hopefully, before the first task force meeting.
Well, I would like
Oh.
to recommend that you, Mr. Yasayan, our chair, certainly go, and then there'll be another member.
Okay.
That would be, I think it would be great.
When is the first task force meeting? Sorry.
June.
We're anticipating it'd be June 10th or June 17th.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do that for now, and then we'll see if Mr. Lee would want to take over or not at the next meeting. Sound good, Chair? I will go, and so will Mr. Astorian, to the next meeting.
And if
That-
Mr.
if
Lee-
that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
If Mr. Lee wants to interchange
We
with
could-
me
we
to
could do
change
that
places,
between
I have
us.
no problems with that
Okay,
either.
perfect.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other updates? No? Comments from the commissioners?
I will comment about the Verdugo Hills 10K run and walk that the Parks and Open Space Foundation put on. It was, again, this is our 3rd event. Started out the first event, first year, around 250 people. Last year went around 450. We were around 700 people this year. The foundation participation is great. We're getting more sponsors that are providing money, not only put on the event, but then money that the foundation has to put back in the park system. I have to say, and it just continually amazes me, the volunteer support that this community has through parks and neighborhood services. You don't think about it, but we had literally had almost hundreds of volunteers that are youth of our city, the police cadets, Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, every walk of life, they were there, and it's just wonderful to see that there are these young people within the community that are coming back, and not only they're being there, but they thoroughly enjoy themselves, and they feel like they're part of something that is very good. So, and I've said before, this extends not just to the volunteers, but the city staff at that event, and the city staff that I've participated with at all the task forces. That's the part that the citizens of the city don't get to see. It's amazing the time that our city people put in to support events, to help the community, to go out of their way. Extra hours is greatly appreciated by me and many other people that I know, but it's not said often enough. So it was a great event. We look to do better next year. It continues to grow. People from all walks of life came and attended this event, and I look for it to just continue to prosper and grow. And that's all I have.
Yeah, I attended last year. I couldn't make it this time, but I love that event, and that's great. Anything else?
Do you have enough parking around the event?
Actually,
Grand Park.
They had to rock
We
one or
don't.
ride.
We don't.
It's a great event. It's a great event, no questions about it. Very good.
Mr. Foy?
And if anyone would like to participate in the Great American Cleanup,
Yes.
which is this Saturday, starting at, I believe, 8:30 or 9 a.m. right here on the City Hall campus.
Yeah, there's lots of
Yeah,
exciting
volunteer-
stuff happening
Very
this
exciting.
weekend. Yeah, I believe Pacific Standard Time is also doing some kind of. The Pacific Standard Time is at Getty.
The LA
event.
Lockma and everybody.
Yeah, and they're doing some event at honoring this building on Saturday. Is that right?
They're not honoring the building. I don't remember
But
whether
they're
it's
gonna-
Saturday or Sunday, but there will be a type of performance art, which I believe the public is invited to participate in,
Right.
which will be using the plaza of this building. The Pacific Standard Times this year they're focusing on modern architecture in Los Angeles, so it's really an honor that they will be hosting an event here and recognizing this building.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I believe the,
Yeah.
I believe the event here is called Clump and Whistle.
And I'll be out of town, so I'll be missing all of these cool events. There's also another event I want to announce is the Jewel City Bike Ride happening on Sunday at Verdugo Park, and it'll be in the morning from 8 till 12 p.m. We'll have classes for kids on bike safety, and we'll host a family ride in the morning, and we'll also have a more challenging ride for the more experienced riders starting at 7:30 a.m. So there's registrations, and all the money being raised goes to support the Sentia and Glendale Healthy Kids. So we're really excited about that, and it's a partnership between the Rotary and also Walk Bike Glendale. And lastly, tomorrow is Bike to Work Day, and Glendale will have several pit stops throughout the city. Flower and Sonora, which is next to Disney and DreamWorks, is actually our highest bike traffic of any part of the city, which is really interesting. Yeah. So we'll have a pit stop there, and it gets really busy. We'll have a pit stop at City Hall and one at GCC. So if you guys are around, go and stop by, and they'll have snacks and also some repair kits and things like that. So it'll be exciting. And then we'll have a happy hour afterwards at BJ's. So everyone's welcome.
What time is the happy hour?
From 5:30 till 8. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, great. We're adjourned.